All right. Good morning. I am Ward 4 Councilmember Janeese Lewis-George, Chair of the Committee on Facilities. It is 10:37 a.m. on Monday, June 16th, 2025. First, I want to ask that all witnesses participating today provide a brief physical description of themselves. For example, I am a Black woman in my 30s with Black hair wearing a blue suit. The budget oversight hearing for the Office of Disability Rights, Mayor's Office of Deafblind and Hard of Hearing, and Department of Disability Services is being held via a hybrid format with public witnesses testifying via Zoom and in person here in room 500 of the John A. Wilson Building, and government witnesses testifying in person. The hearing is also being broadcast live on my website at janeeseward4.com/live. Here are some brief reminders about the committee's protocols for witnesses participating virtually today. All witnesses participating in the Zoom webinar are currently listed as participants. When your time to testify, you will receive a link that will say upgrade to panelists. Please accept that to upgrade to panelists, and then we'll ask that you turn your video camera on should you choose to, and begin your testimony. Public witnesses from bona fide organizations will be given 5 minutes to testify. Public witnesses from the same bona fide organizations will be given subsequently 3 minutes, and then all other public witnesses will be given 3 minutes. We ask that when your time comes up, please conclude your remarks so we can keep going. If you have any technical issues during the hearing, please notify my staff either via the Q&A function in Zoom or by sending an email to facilities@dccouncil.gov. All testimony and pre-hearing documents have been submitted are now available on the council's hearing management system. Witnesses are reminded to please submit a written copy of their testimony for the record by either uploading your testimony to the council's hearing management system or emailing facilities@dccouncil.gov. The record for this hearing closes at 5 p.m. on Friday, June 20th. We will begin with our Office of Disability Rights, starting with public witness testimony. Our first panel of witnesses are Jocelyn Johnson, Catherine Shrout, teacher, Ethiopian Eritrean Special Needs Community, Charles Thomas, Adult Learning Support Coordinator, Academy of Hope Public Charter School, Nicholas Del Don, President of the DuPont East Civic Association. Looks like this panel witness will all be participating virtually. Ms. Johnson, Jocelyn Johnson, you are our first witness. I see you are online. Thank you so much for being here, and good morning. You may begin your testimony.
Good morning. Thank you. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you.
Okay, because you're going in and out. Cool. All right. Yes, my name is Jocelyn Johnson. As you know, former council chairperson for the Ward 4 Mini Commission, as well as a member of the DC Safe Streets Coalition as a member, and a Ward 4 resident and homeowners since 1998, and a resident of Ward 4 since, I guess, 1962. I don't know if they had wards back then, but I go way back. And I don't have a whole lot that I want to say today, but I did want to take this opportunity to testify before you because of the times that we live in. And I just didn't want to see the handicapped as well as seniors be left out in the cold here. So I felt like this was a great opportunity to talk to you about some concerns that have come to me and other folks that are in our group, DC Safe Streets Coalition. I wanted to, first of all, thank you so much for appointing Miss Megan McCarthy Graham to the Bicycle Advisory Council. She was there when we had our last meeting, May 7th. I think that was her first time coming. And it was really good. I felt really very reassured because so many things come out in that council meeting. I have been attending that meeting for a little over a year. and Ward 4 hasn't been represented, but I'm glad they're represented now because they say things that while me and Nick Deladone have been able to, and other people from our group have been able to bring to the Bike Council's attention, I think because we are not members, our comments have kind of gotten lost in the sauce, as they say. We've asked questions because they have someone from the Metropolitan Police Department that actually, for the most part, gives a report every month, every time they have a meeting. And he says things that you can't really challenge. Well, we challenge it. We do ask questions about it. I particularly ask questions. And I think it's because of the disabled community and the senior community. I mean, everybody, when it comes to safety, let me go back. Safety should be across the board. But when we try to ask questions as it pertains to disabled population, they are not really answered. They've said things like they enforce the rules of the road, if you will, for cyclists that might be on the sidewalk or run the light or that kind of thing. And my biggest concern comes to the fact that people on bikes don't have tags. They don't have licenses necessarily with some kind of indicia, that whatever you call it, some kind of symbol that would show that they are aware of what the rules of the road are. And seniors and disabled may not be able to get out of the way, jump across or whatever, and try to safety themselves or brace themselves when cyclists do things that may not be intentional, but they do cause damage, and we're not able to protect ourselves, and we don't have anybody who can speak up on our behalf. So I would like to ask that perhaps this committee could probably take on some of those concerns, and hopefully you as our champion would be able to do that. And now that we have somebody on the BAC, Bicycle Advisory Council, to actually challenge and speak up about the concerns, hopefully this will take on a whole new meaning. We have a lot of issues with the budget shortfall and all that this year, the shortfall. And we don't want the disabled community, the senior population, to get lost in the sauce either, because we're doing a stadium or whatever the new, flavor of the week is, and leave these people out in the, just kind of out there, unprotected.
Thank you.
So we hope that you will take care of that for us. And I appreciate you listening to my comments. Thank you, Ms. Joy.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Next, we will hear from Catherine Trout, teacher, Ethiopian, Eritrean Special Needs Community. All right, I don't see her present. Charles Thomas, the Adult Learning Coordinator at Academy of Hope Adult Public Charter School. Okay. Nick Deldon, President, DuPont East Civic Association. Nicholas Deldon, I see you online. If you can unmute. Thank you. Good morning.
Thank you, Chair Janeese Lewis George, for this opportunity to speak. My name is Nick Deladon. I'm a white male. And I represent DuPont East Civic Action Association and its citywide DC Safe Streets Coalition. Over the past few years, especially during COVID, DC has pushed the installation of bike lanes in what amounts to a radical transformation of traffic patterns, removing traffic lanes, adding bike lanes, causing congestion, creating confusion, and increasing hazards. One population most at risk of these changes is the disabled, but the Department of Disability Service, DDS, the agency charged with addressing such issues, has stood by silently and said nothing. With regard to the road design, DDOT has seized the curb for protected bike lanes. But if bike lanes are sited at the curb, the disabled are denied access to the curb. Disabled need access to the curb in visiting a doctor or the supermarket. Protected bike lanes have forced the disabled to get in and out of their car in traffic. New road designs are supposed to make us safer, but the Washington Post reports that fatalities have not gone down in the last 3 years. On Christmas Eve, a motorist driving on the newly redesigned C Street at 16th Street Northeast struck and killed a pedestrian walking on the sidewalk. On behalf of the disabled, the Department of Disabled Services must join the discussion about road design and bike lanes. At a public meeting held by DDOT on removing traffic lanes on Georgia Avenue, I asked, won't that create congestion? Without hesitation, the project leader said yes. The district intends to create congestion in the streets to discourage car traffic and promote the use of public transit. But DC does not have a reliable public transit. And on behalf of the disabled, DDS must join the discussion about improving public transit. In a lawsuit currently pending at the federal courts, DC road designs and bike lanes violate the requirements of the ADA, Americans with Disabilities Act. The city claims it is not obligated to provide accommodation outside the downtown area. DC Safe Streets Coalition would like to see access to the curb for the disabled. The city should make accommodation for disabled to park. It should designate parking spaces for disabled throughout the city. Parking for the disabled should be identified and advertised so that they are readily found. In the controversial bike plan on 17th Street in DuPont Circle, DDOT claims to have installed 5 designated handicap parking spaces in this commercial stretch. We can find only 3. Even people who live along the busy corridor don't know that they're there. Certainly the disabled would not be able to find them, particularly while driving. Bikers are reckless. Bikers ride with impunity wherever they want, on the sidewalk, in the street, even avoiding the bike lanes built for their safety at great expense. Bikers appear suddenly, silently, surprising the disabled on the sidewalk and in the crosswalk. Biking is the only mode of transit in DC that is unregulated. It is time we called for bike regulation, including certification, registration, licensing, and insurance. Japan, Israel, and New York City are making strides toward bike regulation. DC should do the same. And
Thank you.
join the discussion for bike regulation. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you so much to our witnesses. We will now, thank you to Ms. Johnson and Del Don. Thank you for your testimonies and sharing your concerns about the impact bike lanes may have on people with disabilities and seniors. I will ask ODR to reach out to DDOT and see if and how DDOT considers the accessibility of needs with disabilities and update me on that. I also want to share that ODR actually recently completed the district's Olmsted plan, which includes an entire section on transportation and accessibility for people with disabilities. And we really appreciate them for their hard work in those efforts. And I do would ask you all to take a look at the Olmsted plan that ODR did put together and look at the section on transportation as well to see sort of some of the things they were able to pull out and make suggestions regarding. Now we will hear from our government witnesses from the Office of Disability Rights. Here with us today will be Matthew McCullough, the Director of the Office of Disability Rights, Nok Trin, Chief of Staff, and Allison White, Executive Director of DC Developmental Disabilities Council. While they get situated, I want to note that the Office of Disability Rights and the Mayor's Office of Deaf, Blind, and Hard of Hearing and the Department on Disability Service each hold distinct and critical functions in the district's government and their ability to enforce the rights of and provide services to people with disabilities. As you all know, we're here to examine their fiscal year 26 proposed budgets to provide each agency with the resources necessary to fulfill their mission, to make sure that they have what they need. With the Office of Disability Rights, we'll discuss agencies' progress in participating in the district's ADA compliance program and check how the actions of federal government are impacting federal programs for people with disabilities, including the Developmental Disabilities Council. With the Mayor's Office of Deaf, Blind, and Hard of Hearing, we will evaluate the Mayor's proposal for the Department of Disability Service to absorb the office, considering why the decision was made, what doing so would mean for the office losing its budgetary and structural existence as a separate agency, and whether the Office of Disability Rights may be a better fit given its similar mission and responsibilities within the Office of Disability Rights as well. Finally, on the Department of Disability Services, we'll be examining large increases in the Disability Determination Administration's budget due to anticipated growth in waiver services, and we'll also discuss how the lack of funding for the wage increases for direct support professionals under the DSP Rate Payment Act and Certified Nurse Aid Amendment Act will affect providers' ability to recruit, retain, and qualify DSPs and home health aides. And we'll also get an update on our Randolph Shepherd Bending Facilities Program, as well as any testimony we have received already and testimony we received today. We'll incorporate those questions in. With that, we now have the Office of Disability Rights in front of us. And Director McCullough, is always great to see you. Thank you for being here. Before you begin your testimony, it is the council's ability to administer an oath to you and your team. So if you all could just raise your right hands. Do you swear or affirm under penalty of perjury that the testimony you're about to give to the Committee on Facilities is the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
I do.
Thank you, Director. You may begin your testimony.
Good morning, Chairperson Lewis George, and the members of the Committee on Facilities. My name is Matthew McCullough, and I'm the Director of ODR. It gives me great pleasure to speak on the agency's proposed fiscal year 2026 budget. Mayor Bowser's FY26 Grow DC budget makes strong strategic investments in building local businesses, the area economy, affordable and accessible housing, education, human services, public safety, transportation, and employment services that provide our residents with disabilities with a viable pathway to improve their own trajectory and quality of life. Furthermore, these investments reflect the needs of priorities identified by district residents. Our purpose, ODR's focus is the District of Columbia's government's commitment to the Americans with Disabilities Act and compliance with all other federal and local disability-related laws. The district serves as a nationally recognized leader, ensuring that programs, services, and facilities operated by the district are fully accessible to and usable by people with disabilities. ODR actively supports, promotes, and works to advance the protections available under the ADA and other laws impacting our citizens with disabilities in the areas of community living, employment, housing, transportation, and other government programs and services. Particularly, our agency highly provides guidance, information, technical assistance to district government agencies and people accessing government programs and services. Additionally, ODR processes requests for reasonable accommodations and modification policies for district employees and community members with disabilities. ODR also conducts ADA accessibility training and provides staff and administrative support to the federally funded Developmental Disabilities Council and the Mayor's DC Commission on Partners with Disabilities. Let's talk about the proposed fiscal year 2026 budget. ODR proposes a total operating budget of $2,121,872. This includes approximately $624,000 in federal funding allocated to the Developmental Disabilities Council to assist in continuing their efforts in implementing the 5-year state plan starting from fiscal year 2022 to 2026 to improve the quality of life for all district residents with developmental disabilities and their families. The remaining operating budget of $1,497,817 constituents allowing staff to have an unwavering commitment to greatness, excellence, and discipline while ensuring that the District of Columbia continues to serve as a national model for urban accessibility. Let's talk about looking forward to the future. The FY26 budget and Grow DC budget offers strong leadership, direction, and implementation to the following projects and initiatives. 1. Continue engagement and work with all district agencies and their ED coordinators in identifying and effectively implementing their annual ED compliance plans. 2. Partnership with multiple district agencies and community stakeholders to continue implementing the district's 2025 through 2027 Homestead Community Integration Plan. 3rd, cultivation of opportunities for respect and inclusion among the aging population, neighbors, and visitors through multi-generational and cultural activities, partnership with the Age-Friendly DC Task Force. And 4th, collaboration with the Department of Buildings and the General Services to review construction plans for new district government facilities and provide accessibility recommendations in accordance with the ADA standards and regulations. ODR is part of Mirabelle's strong leadership in ensuring that the District of Columbia possesses strong values for disability rights while serving as a national model of urban accessibility. I extend my deepest appreciation and respect to my ODR staff, the DD Council, and the DC Commission person with disabilities for their tireless efforts and commitment to improving the trajectory and quality of life for district residents with disabilities. Closing, I thank the communities and your leadership and support. ODR appreciates the opportunity to share our achievements, plans for continued progress, and we look forward to working with the committee. This concludes my testimony. My team and I are happy to answer your questions at this time.
Thank you so much, Director, for your thorough testimony and for all the work that ODR has put in over the last year as we look at your fiscal year budget. I see the proposed budget includes $624,000 in federal funding for the Developmental Disability Council. Is that more or less than last year?
It's about the same. Our federal award is about $527,000, and we usually budget about 100 of carryover.
Yeah.
So it's about the same
Okay.
year to year.
Okay, it's about the same. Okay. And which federal agency and which office administers these funds to the Developmental Disability Council?
It's the U.S. Department of Health and Human Services, and it was the Administration for Community Living, which was dismantled.
That's what I was wondering.
So it will now be the Administration for children and families, I believe. Still within HHS.
Okay. As a result of that, was the availability of these funds ever in jeopardy or in doubt given the actions of the administration or Congress over the last 6 months?
I would say a lot of doubt. There was definitely a lot of doubt
Okay.
over the last 6 months about what would happen with funding. The current FY26 proposed president's budget includes flat funding for DD councils across the country.
All right. I'm asking this because I guess my real question is, are we confident these funds will be available from the federal government during all of fiscal year 26? Or how confident are you? I should rephrase that, sorry.
Yeah. We're in regular communication with our colleagues across the country and
Okay.
the National Association, and there's I would say a moderate level of confidence that we will get the funding that's included in the proposed budget,
Okay.
but still a lot of questions. I'd say
Got it.
more than 50% confident, but
Yeah, and because my understanding is the Development Discipline Council is a legally required entity in the district, correct?
yes.
So if funds for DDC became unavailable for whatever reason, I'm making sure ODR has communicated to the executive that we need to have a plan to ensure the DDC can continue operating. And I'm just, have those conversations been have they been happening? Are they happening? A contingency plan? Yes.
Yes.
Okay, wonderful. Well, please stay in contact with, with us, the committee about it, but please just want to make sure we're having those conversations should a contingency need to happen.
Thank you.
From FTEs, it looks like ODR proposed budget notes a shift of 0.3 FTEs from the local budget to the federal grants budget. Why is this 0.3 FTE and why the shift from local to federal funds?
I don't catch.
It looks like the cost shift is, I guess, about 20,000.
I could respond to that.
Okay.
I'm Anthony Young, the agency fiscal officer.
Good to see
for
you.
the
Thank you.
agency. Good to see you again, Chairperson Lewis George. Yes, the shift is done. We're adjusting the salaries given the responsibilities of the individual, so it's reflecting the split responsibilities of that individual.
Okay, so will using the 20,000 for this FTE mean there is a 20,000 less for the services that would otherwise be paid for from the federal grant?
Yes, that would be directed toward support services.
Support services.
Yes.
Got it. Okay. I wanted to ask some questions about over the last several weeks of budget hearings, I've asked about multiple agencies, including DCPS, DGS, and DPR, about their accessibility efforts and their compliance with the ADA. And Director, I want to tell you, every agency had nothing but positive things to say about working with you and your team. Over the last few years, we've started working together, and I've really noticed a shift in agencies' attitudes around actions around accessibility, and especially through increased awareness and participation of ODR and ADA self-evaluations and implementation plans. I think that's a testament to the great work that you and your team are doing to improve the district's level of accessibility for district residents and employees. And today I want to make sure ODR has the budget to really continue that tremendous progress over the year. So that's, how I'm coming to these questions today, really. DCPS told me about 2/3 of schools now have compliance plans submitted to ODR. Does that sound about right?
Yes.
Okay. And that's progress considering no schools had completed plans about 2 years ago. And I told the chancellor, my expectation is for all schools to have plans by the end of the year. And so if any barriers come up with DCPS meeting that goal, please do let me know before the end of the year comes. I spoke with Director Freeman about DPR's participation in the ADA compliance program. Curious how many DPR sites, which include pools, recreation centers, and playgrounds, now have self-evaluations and recreation centers.
We will need to follow up with that
Okay.
question.
Great.
Thank you.
If you could just, what would be helpful if you all can just send the committee an updated list of agencies that have submitted compliance plans and what site-specific self-evaluations and implementation plans they have. DGS, I know you mentioned ODR's collaboration with the Department of General Services, which is also in this cluster, on reviewing construction plans for new district government facilities. I'm so happy about that as well. They reported that to me. I think getting ODR involved in the ADA-related facilities work orders was a great progress in resolving accessibility issues quicker. And I think ODR having a seat at the table during the planning and construction phase will go even further by making sure our government spaces are accessible from the start. Can you share if any capital projects ODR has advised on, and sort of what accessibility features these projects will be included as a result?
We're still in the initial conversations regarding those projects, and so we're currently in conversations with DGS about what current contracts they have for new buildings and new construction. So the hope is that once they can give us that list, my team can assess what standards still need to be incorporated in the blueprints. So during the actual construction phase, you don't have any of the retrofitting that's going on there because the government more money after the fact.
Got it. Okay. Okay, well, let's just make sure we continue those conversations because, as you know, buildings last for years, but they'll, and we wanted to try to get these things done on the outset, so it'll be a part of the building and not sort of a before thought instead of an afterthought. One of the things since gaining oversight over DPR for this council period, one of the issues often raised to me is playgrounds not always accessible to children with disabilities, even our newer playgrounds. Is ODR consultant on how to make playgrounds more accessible? And if so, sort of have you worked on any playground projects recently to sort of change that aspect?
In the past, we've been approached by Parks and Recs regarding the surfaces of the playgrounds. First thing, it was dealing with dirt and gravel, and so ODR has consulted with Parks and Recs on using more accessible surfacing that would allow children with disabilities or grandparents or parents with disabilities to actually engage on the playground.
Yeah.
So yeah.
Okay. Of course, there's like no one, size fits all for accessible playground features as different, disabilities require different accommodations. But I think there is no agency that really understands that more than you all. And so I would ask that ODR reach out to DPR and DGS to sort of collaborate on some playground accessibility so really more children with disabilities can enjoy them. Yes.
I'd like to add that in our discussion with the OB and DGS, we are to review designs for everything DC government related. So playground
that will be in there. Wonderful. That's great to hear. Thank you so much. One thing during the performance oversight hearing early this year, public witnesses expressed concern about a DDS policy that prohibits residents who are incarcerated from applying for DDA services unless they have a release date. I think afterwards, this committee received a request to consult with ODR to determine whether the Americans with Disability Act and the Olmstead decision requires DDS to accept applications for DDA services before individuals with intellectual and developmental disabilities who are incarcerated have a release date. Can ODR provide an update on this issue, and has ODR issued guidance on this issue?
So we're going to engage with DDS on their policies and to see if there's room for progress. We're also going to work with the Department of Behavioral Health and other agencies that have other DC residents currently engaged with the criminal justice system to see what practices they may have. This issue is actually a brand new issue for the district that we need to continue to collaborate on and determine any policies that should be in place going forward. And so we look forward to working with Annie Reid and his staff going forward.
Got it.
particular matter.
Wonderful. I appreciate that. I'd like to see if you all can just do those things as soon as possible. Just my hope is that we can get it resolved soon to make sure the district sort of is not violating any federal laws in this regard by discriminating against incarcerated individuals with disabilities. And we continue to get a request to our committee about sort of where the guidance is on this. And so we just want to make sure that everybody's doing everything possible to get an answer so we can respond to the public accordingly. The other thing I wanted to talk about was enhancement. ODR's proposed budget includes a one-time enhancement of about $14,831 in one-time funding, of which $6,700 is for equipment and $3,900 is for out-of-town travel. What types of items does ODR purchase with these funds? And is the increase due to ODR anticipating a need to purchase specific items in fiscal year 26?
Yeah.
For FY26, we did not request an enhancement.
I'm sorry, as I can provide a point of clarity on that, the funds were actually identified and initially they were reduced, but then those funds were restored as a
Okay.
one-time enhancement. So
Got
budget
it.
is basically
Restored as
flat.
one time. Got it. Wonderful. Thank you for that. And then what types of I guess, and so for that, do you all do any out of state travel, or what does ODR do as far as out of state travel? Is this to go to like conferences and do those and trainings, et cetera?
Yeah. So based on current practices and expectation, we've limited our state travel to simply preserve the budget. Once the restrictions are lifted, myself and I will reconsider doing our state travel, but the fact that we do live in DC, a lot of the learning can take place in DC as well.
Got it. Okay. Last question is about the mayor's budget proposes removing the mayor's office of deaf, blind, and hard of hearing as an agency entity and moving the funding, employees, and functions into a program within Department on Disability Services. Of course, the committee is analyzing this proposal carefully given the unique history and responsibilities of MODDH. One of the factors I'm looking at is how MODDH has a much more similar role to ODR than DDS. In fact, MODDH's establishing act is actually modeled after ODR's. The mandates of both agencies focuses on ensuring district agency compliance with local and federal disability laws. In contrast, DDS is charged with providing services to people with disabilities, as you know. As such, I'm considering whether ODR would be a better home for MODDH than DDS. I won't ask you for your position on the mayor's proposal. I wouldn't put you in that position. But my question to you is, do you believe MODDH would be able to operate successfully if the agency's budget and employees are placed within a program within ODR rather than DDS?
It would be hard to say because this is a new issue that's being brought to us right now. So I wouldn't want to comment on that.
Understood.
Thank you.
That is all the questions I have for you and your team. Do you have anything else you would like to put on the record as it relates to budget?
I want to thank Mayor Bowser and her team for continuing to support this agency. I realize that other agencies have received cuts, but in terms of ODR, we remain at the level of funding that's required to move forward. So I want to thank the mayor's team and the DC Council for their continued leadership and pushing ODR forward too. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you all for your testimony and your service to the District of Columbia, especially to residents and employees with disabilities. You're doing tremendous work and we're really grateful for it. Thank you all so much. We will now turn to the Mayor's Office of Deaf, Deafblind, and Hard of Hearing, starting with public witnesses' testimony. All right. Ready? Okay. Panel 1, Tawny Hilbach, public witness. Rachel Chesler, public witness. Azeb Adir, president of the Ethiopian Eritrean Special Needs Community. Emmanuel Perodin Njoku. And if there are any other witnesses either in this room or on the Zoom who wish to testify on the Mayor's Office of Deaf, Deafblind, and Hard of Hearing, if so, either come to the witness table or raise your hand on the Zoom link. Reminder, if there's any witnesses that are online, please raise your hand by pressing the raise hand button on the Zoom. Right. We do have one witness who actually sent their video in. His name is Emmanuel Perodin Njoku. He's a Black male wearing a brown shirt with glasses. And I'm going to ask my committee director, Sebastian, to play his testimony as we wait for our public witness who will be testifying in person.
Hello all. Dear Councilwoman Lewis George and members of the Committee of Facilities, Thank you so much for this opportunity to address the council today. My name is Emmanuel. I'm a research associate at Gallaudet University and a longtime resident at DC. Growing up in Ward 7 before my family moved to Ward 5. I am testifying about the elimination of MODDHH being created. That was because budget to zero next year. I am not in favor of this decision. The purpose of MODDHH being created was because decisions were being made about the deaf, deafblind, hard of hearing community that did not come from deaf people. With the reduction of the budget to zero, this means that MODDHH no longer has financial oversight of the ADA communications accommodations. It also does not make sense because MODDHH is responsible for compliance and government operations, which is very separate from Health and Human Services that DDS is responsible for. Feels like lumping disability agencies together without understanding the different roles the agencies play. If this decision is being made, why isn't the Office of Disability Rights being moved to DDS too? I don't feel comfortable with the idea of MODDHH, a department led and run by deaf people who are members of the deaf community, not being able to properly oversee the accommodations that the deaf community receives. The department was founded largely in response to concerns and complaints about inconsistency and lack of access from the deaf community. Since MODDHH was founded and started operating, I've come to see much more awareness from the DC deaf community in public events, leading into more engagement. For instance, I was able to send in written testimony for the DC Open Movie Captioning Requirement Amendment Act of 2024, which was one of the earliest projects of MODDHH and garnered much attention thanks to its visibility within the deaf community. I can only begin to scratch the surface of the work the MODDHH team does to ensure there is quality interpreting and CART services, and I want the department to remain capable of administering its own budget, rather than having people who do not understand the deaf community well or have little to no connection with the community overseeing the budget that affects our community's access to city-sponsored events. Again, I support MODDHH being able to oversee its own budget. I think it should remain under its current agency, which would allow for the office to keep doing its valuable work. Thank you for your time and consideration. If you have any questions or matters you would like to discuss, I can be reached at the contact information given in the written testimony that I sent in. Thank you again.
Thank you. Thank you so much for your testimony. We will now hear from Tawny Hillblock, public witness.
Hi, good morning. Hello, Councilmember Lewis, George, and members of the Committee on Facilities. Thank you for the opportunity to address the council today. My name is Tawny Hillblock, and I am a proud resident of Ward 6, where I have lived for the past 25 years. I am here today to testify against the proposed elimination of the MODDHH's budget, which would reduce its funding to zero in the coming fiscal year. This year marks the 35th anniversary of the Americans with Disabilities Act, an important milestone in civil rights history. But it's also deeply personal to us here in DC because it was propelled by the 1988 Deaf President Now movement that happened right here at Gallaudet University. That movement wasn't just about selecting a deaf university president. It was about self-autonomy, self-determination, and ensuring that decisions impacting the deaf community were made through our lens, our perspectives, and our lived experience. The establishment of the MOD reflected that same principle, that policy decisions, oversight of accessibility services, and public accountability must center deafblind, and hard of hearing voices, not to be sidelined into bureaucratic corners where their work is forgotten or deprioritized. In the past 5 years, MODDHH has made significant progress, most notably by establishing autonomy in connection with the mayor's office. That shift has allowed the agency to better advocate for accessibility, compliance, and equity. However, this progress is now under threat. Reassigning MODDHH under the Department on Disability Services, DDS, while slashing its budget risks undoing all of that progress. The rationale doesn't make sense. MODDHH's work is about civil rights compliance, not direct services. If it absolutely must be moved, why not to the Office of Human Rights, OHR, which already enforces ADA compliance and understands the scope of such work? MODDHH must retain financial oversight of interpreting, CART, and captioning services. Without it, quality control, accountability, and access will suffer. For example, now I tried to look at the video and it was choppy. And that's an example of access that is necessary and needed. So in my professional view as deaf studies advocate scholar, I do not agree with MODDH losing that authority. Daily decisions must be made by professionals with cultural and linguistic expertise, deaf professionals who understand the real life impact of good or bad services like MODDH staff. If DC truly wants to live up to its initials, Deaf City, it must back up that nickname with action. That means investing in MODDHH, expanding its authority, and ensuring full access across all public-facing agencies. Interpreters, captions, economic opportunities, policy changes, and countless everyday adjustments are still very much needed. I recommend instead that MODDHH retain full control over its own budget and be given more enforcement authority to see even more effective progress. If a move is absolutely necessary, the Office of Human Rights would be the logical and more appropriate new home. Please do not strip away the hard-fought autonomy of this vital agency. Thank you for your time and consideration.
Thank you for your testimony. I'm checking to see if any of our other witnesses have joined us online. Okay, looks like we don't have any other witnesses online. Tawny, thank you so much for your testimony. My question for you is, why is it so important for the Mayor's Office of Deaf, Blind, and Hard of Hearing to have its own autonomy? And what features of the Office of Human Rights make that one of the locations it should be located if relocated?
So, council member, that's a great question. I would like to talk about the perspective of the precedent. The 44th state has independent Office of Deaf and Hard of Hearing Services Commission, and every office is independent, directly under the governor's office. And so I would like to see DC in that same vein, on that same trend. It doesn't have to be completely different. And it's unnecessary for it to be so here. Independence would mean that they can have new ideas, accept new ideas, new outcomes in their own office. And if they're under the Office of Human Rights, maybe they could do partnerships within, without the risk of being left behind. Because as a deaf person and deafness, working with interpreters, maybe struggling
to make sure that hearing individuals.
make sure that hearing individuals are attentive to my needs. I work federally and I have an interpreter, and I have to have a qualified interpreter to make sure that my voice is heard. And so the MODDHH office, as an independent entity, you know, there are a lot of people who signed there, and we can all communicate effectively with each other and share ideas and thrive. And moving to an environment where I would rely on interpreters, I would have to make sure that I'm understood and fight for our voice to be heard. And that it would happen if it would be like we would lose our energy and our autonomy. And so that is one of my main concerns: the cost of interpreters and improvement of access to not marginalize our voices.
Thank you. Thank you so much. Thank you to all our witnesses today. For the Mayor's Office of Deaf, Blind, Hard of Hearing, I want to note we did receive a number of testimonies uploaded to the hearing management system as well. And individuals are encouraged to continue to upload testimonies to the hearing management system as we consider what the next steps are for MODA. We will now turn to our government testimony.
Yeah.
Who else? All right. Here with us today is Director Carrie Cook of the Mayor's Office of Deaf, Blind, and Hard of Hearing. Keisha Gore, Chief of Staff as well. And can you state your name?
Antonio Baxter, Agency Fiscal Officer.
Wonderful. Thank you for being here. Director, it is great to see you again, and thank you all for being here. Before you begin your testimony, it is the practice of the council to administer an oath. Would you all please raise your right hands? Do you swear or affirm under penalty of perjury that the testimony you're about to give to the Committee on Facilities is the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
I do.
Thank you, Director. You may begin your testimony.
Good morning, Chairperson George. I'm a Black woman with braids, and I'm wearing a black blazer with the logo, a green logo on the left. Good morning, Chairperson Louis George, members of the council, staff of the Committee on Facilities, and residents of the District of Columbia. My name is Carrie Cook, and I'm honored to serve as the Director of the Mayor's Office of Deaf, Deafblind, and Hard of Hearing, MODDHH, under the visionary leadership of Mayor Muriel Bowser. I'm pleased to testify today on the 2026 budget for the Mayor's Office of Deaf, Deafblind, and Hard of Hearing. On Tuesday, May 27th, Mayor Bowser presented the district's Grow DC FY26 budget to council. In addition to continuing on the progress since 2015, the budget for next fiscal year will focus on 3 core elements: public safety, public education, and a clean DC. As the mayor stated, through strategic investments and shared sacrifice, the budget invests not only in a safer, stronger DC right now, but it looks ahead 3, 4, and 5 years and includes investments that will accelerate the district's comeback and increase capacity to make big investments in the future. The proposed FY26 budget for the Mayor's Office of Deaf, Deafblind, and Hard of Hearing includes keeping the same level of staffing, 8 full-time employees. The transition of the MODDHH budget to the Department of Disability Services will allow for strengthened coordination, enhanced service delivery, and will provide residents with hearing loss with more streamlined access to the full range of supports and resources available through the district's disability network. Most importantly, this transition is largely financial. MODDHH will still be empowered to complete its mission. We are grateful for Mayor Bowser's commitment, which allows the office to thrive in providing accessible communication in ASL, pro-tactile ASL, CART, as well as trilingual interpreting. While the Mayor's Office of Deaf, Deafblind, and Hard of Hearing is not the only mechanism to engage with deaf, deafblind, deaf-disabled, hard of hearing, and late deafened Washingtonians, I want to spend the next several moments describing some of the programs, services, and engagements our office will lead. In FY26, MODDHH will continue supporting Mayor Bowser's administration's core government functions that focus on improving the quality of life for all DC residents and businesses. We will continue to focus our work on the following areas. A focus on public safety. We are excited to continue our Securing Accessibility for Emergencies, our SAFE program, in partnership with MPD, particularly their Deaf and Hard of Hearing unit, which will improve relations between our hardworking public safety officials and deaf, deafblind, deaf-disabled, hard of hearing, and late deafened residents. We are also continuing to work together along with DC Fire and Emergency Management, DCHCMA, the Office of Unified Communications, and the Department of Transportation on unique communication accessibility tools to help residents with hearing loss have equal access to safety with law enforcement and other emergency services personnel. We are most excited about our partnership with the Office of Neighborhood Safety and Engagement, ONSE, to increase accessible services and resources for residents with hearing loss. This expansion of the SAFE program, including ONSE, showcases our commitment to efficient use of government resources by not reinventing the wheel, but rather supporting already thriving programs in their accessibility outreach. Next, I'll focus on educational advancement. One thing that makes all the staff of MODDHH proud to work for Mayor Bowser is her commitment to innovation. As members of the DC Early Hearing Detection and Intervention, EHDI, under the Department of Health, in partnership with Strong Start DC Early Intervention Program, under the Office of the State Superintendent of Education, OSSE, we are able to connect parents and families to resources and services benefiting their children at the pre-K level. Additionally, in FY26, MODDHH plans to advance fostering resources for accessible and multimodal education, FRAME, a coalition with EHDI, OSSE and DC Public Charter Schools, DC Public Schools, Model Secondary School for the Deaf, and the University of District of Columbia, in order to streamline resource sharing for Washingtonians who are parents or guardians of children with hearing loss. Earlier this year, Frame hosted an all-day training for DCPS staff to rave reviews. They asked for MODDHH to provide the training district-wide at upcoming DCPS trainings, which we are in the planning stages of what that will look like for FY26. Our Frame program promises to be a useful resource that Mayor Bowser can provide to the current educational services in the district. And finally, we're focusing on a clean DC. Mayor Bowser's Grow DC budget includes strategic investments in infrastructure, preparing DC for future growth while addressing the current needs of Washingtonians. MODDHH aims to continually amplifying the many opportunities of the Office of the Deputy Mayor for Planning and Economic Development, and our partnerships with the Department of Public Works and the Department of Licensing and Consumer Protection. Our annual ASL CBE training is heavily anticipated and well attended, showcasing Mayor Bowser's investments in accessibility of all government systems for Washingtonians. We're excited to see the ways Mayor Bowser has prioritized the real needs of district residents and how fittingly it overlaps with the mandate of MODDHH to ensure that all programs and public information are accessible to the deaf, deafblind, and hard of hearing communities, which is DC Law 23-152. Section 2-1431.02 Amendment. Additionally, the Code of the District of Columbia mandates that the office is overseeing district-wide compliance with laws that affect the deaf, deafblind, and hard of hearing communities. Section 2-1431.03A, which enables us to refer residents to the district's enforcement agency, the Office of Human Rights, for partnership. For example, we have been publicizing and monitoring compliance with DC Law 25-190, which is the Open Movie Captioning Requirement Amendment Act of 2024. This law bolsters the inclusiveness of the district's entertainment economy. So in closing, I want to thank Mayor Bowser for her leadership and the opportunity to serve in this capacity. It is truly an honor to serve in such a direct and impactful way under the tutelage of a leader who has guided the district through challenges so successfully in the past, knowing we will get through these current financial limitations with an approach that centers dollars and cents, without sacrificing our shared commitment to putting the real needs of Washingtonians first. I also want to thank my staff in MODDHH for their continued work on behalf of residents with hearing loss, and colleagues throughout the district government for their continued commitment to ensuring residents with hearing loss enjoy the best DC has to offer, as well as the access that is available to them. I look forward to our continued work together. Thank you for the opportunity to testify today, and I look forward to answering your questions at this time.
Thank you, Director, for your thorough testimony. And thank you for all the work that your office has done and continues to do. Director, for our discussion, I really want to get into the details of the reason, logistics, and impact of the mayor's proposal to move the funding, FTEs, and functions of your office into the Department of Disability Services. I'm not going to ask you or whether you agree or disagree with the proposal, but rather I want to engage with you about the proposal itself, as well as if other options could have been made or the same or even a better outcome. I have two main questions regarding the mayor's proposal. Why was MODDH's status as a separate agency removed? And why was DDS the agency selected to absorb MODDH?
So this transition reflects the district commitment to integrating services for residents with disabilities into a single specialized agency. What that means is that the best equipped to provide direct support and advocacy By housing MODA within DDS, Department of Disability Services, we will enhance service coordination, improve access to resources, and ensure that the unique needs of the deaf, blind, and hard of hearing communities are met within a comprehensive disability services framework. This move aligns best with practices in disability policy and positions DDS to more effectively champion the rights and inclusion of residents with disabilities. So what that means is, while we're currently under the Mayor's Office of Community Affairs, that was excellent for our engagement and our outreach. Now with the transition to DDS, we're more apt to be able to take charge and take hold of the resources within DDS.
Thank you for that explanation, Director. We received a lot of testimony already via the hearing management system with residents who are from the deaf, hard of hearing community, and their feelings overall has been, we've tried it that way before, where your community was put in other offices, and as a result, not given the attention that was deserved. And so it's almost like by doing this, we would be going back to the status quo. And I'm not sure that's something, I understand we're in a difficult budget year, but that's not something as chair of this committee that I feel comfortable with doing. That is to say, to you and your team, though, it is because of the good work that you have been doing over these last couple of years that I feel so strongly about not returning to the status quo. But I do want to be involved in a very serious conversation with you and the Director of the Mayor's Office on Community Affairs, Ms. Reyes, about where the best fit for you all to go is, or whether it is even possible for us to maintain your autonomy, and if so, how. Now to the budget. In your testimony, you said the transition to DDS is largely also financial. That was my initial understanding as well. However, it looks like MODA's budget was reduced by only $8,918. That tells me there isn't really any cost saving by this absorption. Can you elaborate on the financial reasoning behind the decision for the office to be absorbed into another agency? Are there any financial benefits outside of the $8,900 in savings? Given the lack of cost savings, I'm having trouble seeing how this is a primarily financial decision.
I would say the one that I'm probably most looking forward to is the partnership with the Rehabilitation Services Administration, so that's the vocational services across the district. That's definitely something that our community utilizes the most, rather, maybe not the most, but rather we hear a lot of feedback the most from RSA. And so I see being under DDS and having that strong partnership, being in the same agency, that's where I see a huge benefit as well. So while, yes, there may not be a significant financial saving, I do believe a lot of that will manifest in increased efficiency.
I understand that. I guess my question then would be, why can't MODA have a partnership with RSA without being a part of DDS? Can it do so basically as a separate agency?
Well, we do, right? Similarly with the Office of Human Rights, we partner with them as the enforcement agency. So we receive, as part of our responsibility for compliance, we receive the complaint, we may be able to do some reviews, and then we not only upgrade it, or rather refer to the Office of Human Rights, but we have constituents refer to them as well. And that's able to be done without being a part of the Office of Human Rights. But I do believe that when it comes to staffing, we're looking at not only the full resources in terms of partnership, but the full resources in terms of the current benefits that we're not able to tap into right now. So for example, DDS has a significant general counsel team of several members who are well versed in disability law and policy. As you're well aware, most lawyers have areas of specialization, and disability is often not that area of specialization. Within DDS, the Office of the General Counsel Division has a large number of legal staff who are well versed in disability policy. This will aid us in our compliance piece as well. So that's how I see it benefiting being a partnership within the agency.
Understood. I want to talk about, in addition to budget, the structure. Looking at DDS's budget chapter, the office is listed as a division of the agency, just like the Developmental Disabilities Administration and the Rehabilitation Services Administration. Budgetarily, it is a program like DDA and RSA. Both DDA and RSA have deputy directors that report to the director. I believe the executive intention is not for MODDHH to report to the DDS director. Is that correct?
Yes, that is the case, but even now, there's a reporting system within the Mayor's Office of Deaf, Blind, and Hard of Hearing. So I report to the Mayor's Office of Community Affairs Director, Zach Reyes. She in turn reports to the Deputy Chief of Staff, Steve Walker. He in turn reports to the Chief of Staff, Lindsay Parker, who then reports to Mayor Bowser. I actually see with this move, we have less of a layer of reporting because we actually lose one layer of reporting. First, I report to Andrew Reese. He reports to the Deputy Mayor of Health and Human Services, and then Mayor Bowser. So we're actually cutting more middlemen with this move.
So in this situation, who would you report to if not the DDS director, the Deputy Mayor for Health and Human Services?
In the move, I will be referring to Andy Reese, correct. I would be reporting to Andy Reese as he would have control over the budget, correct.
Okay, so you will be reporting to
Yes, correct.
Andy.
Yes.
Because there's no subtitle, have you been told whether you will maintain your cabinet status now that the office has been absorbed within another agency that has a cabinet as well?
Yes, correct. That is not changed. I'm still the director.
Okay.
And it's not new, right? We see it in other agencies. For example, the director of Medicaid, that's a cabinet position appointed by Mayor Bowser, but they don't report directly to Mayor Bowser. They report to the HCF, right? Even now within the executive office of the Mayor's Office of Community Affairs it's a cabinet position, but she also reports to the Deputy Chief of Staff and the Chief of Staff. So it's not new to district government, it's just a shift. That's why I stated the change would be largely financial. Of course, there are some infrastructure changes, but most of it is just paper trail.
Got it. One concern I have is also about the executive's legal authority to require DDS absorb MODDHH without changing the law. The council created the office as its own agency, not as an office within another agency. That is why up until the budget, the office had its own agency designation and budget chapter. Is there a reason why the executive did not include a subtitle to legally facilitate the absorption of a previously separate agency into an already existing agency?
I cannot answer that question, but I do believe that the decision was made to benefit not just the residents, but also for the practical way we operate. Even now, we don't function as something that's totally independent. We are an interdependent agency, as is every other agency in district government. We're all interdependent. And so this just allows us to be interdependent more on the disability side and the community engagement side without sacrificing our community engagement and advocacy.
Understood. We don't want you at all to have to sacrifice that. I think the question for the council is whether the legal authority is there to do it without council action. And there's no subtitle currently in the budget, so there would have to be a subtitle, which I am not interested in creating. The next question I have is regarding, outside of the question of whether your office should no longer be a separate agency, I'm also questioning if DDS is the right place to put your office's funds, employees, and functions. Is the plan for MODDHH to move their office to DDS headquarters? And, I'm asking that because, we all just worked for the last couple of years with DGS for a while to move into a new space that is highly accessible for your employees and your constituents.
That's correct. I, at this time, don't envision a physical move. Again, it's largely financial.
So that means there won't be any savings in rental cost.
I think it would depend on what it ends up look like in fiscal year 26. So right now, we were able to save in occupancy costs because we weren't able to we didn't need to pay rent for Reeves. In the move to the 899 North Capitol, we do have occupancy fees. So there's no change in funding. And I think that just reflects Mayor Bowser didn't want to have to cut. There are a lot of agencies that are struggling through a lot of cuts right now. And we were able to maintain things the way they are financially because she's so committed to making sure our office has exactly what we need.
Got it. When I ask you this question, this is a genuine question because we received this from two witnesses on testimony, and I genuinely want to know from your expertise this. In written testimony, one of the witnesses stated, in quote, much of the community does not identify solely or at all as, quote, disabled. This was said in objection to MODDHH being moved to DDS. To me, the core of that concern is that being places within DDS forces the people who rely on your office as being automatically labeled as having a disability. What would you say to the members of your constituents you represent who do not want to be a part of DDS and do not identify themselves as disabled in that regard? Is that a genuine concern that you have, or what you know from your outreach, the community to hold?
That is definitely something that's topical within the deaf community at large. There is a number of people who say deaf is a cultural identity, not one of physical limitation, which is understandable. The thing is, with this move, we're not asking people to change how they identify. Currently, the policies put in place are for disability law and policy. So, for example, the ADA covers people who have significant facial distortion. They may not label themselves as a disabled person, but the law that covers them is in conjunction with the laws for disability. So similarly, when it comes to the Americans with Disabilities Act, almost all of the current progress we've made with disability inclusion and rights and policy are under the Americans with Disabilities Act. I do remember even during the time of the development of the Americans with Disabilities Act, there was a lot of conversation in the community as well with, well, maybe we should have a separate one, with the understanding that as long as it took to get the ADA passed, understanding that while it may not be a social, cultural, personal identity, it is one that is a political identity under disability, and that's how we were able to attain our rights. So most of our resources and services are a direct result of not only the Rehab Act of 73, but more specifically the American Disabilities Act of 1990 and its ensuing amendments. So that's definitely something that's a conversation in the community, and we are not asking anyone to change how they identify. It's utmost respect to that, which I personally understand. Growing up, I was hard of hearing, and I didn't identify as deaf. I identified as disabled. And then now, coming into my own deaf identity, I don't identify as disabled, I identify as deaf. So that's not something we're asking people to change. What we're asking is to make sure that we're using the best streamlined government resources in the best way, especially now during some challenging financial times.
Got it. I truly appreciate that answer, Director, and thank you for also sharing your personal story as a part of that answer. As I mentioned to Director McCullough, I think there's a strong argument that if the Office of Deaf, Blind, and Hard of Hearing must lose its agency status and placed within an agency, I considered it to be ODR rather than DDS, and I just wanted to walk you through those considerations. First, MODDH's Establishing Act was put in the same area of the DC Code as ODRs, which is Title II, Government Administration, Chapter 14, Human Rights, Unit C, Disability Rights Protection. That is because both the Office of Deaf, Blind, and Hard of Hearing was created to serve a familiar function as ODR, except with a specific focus on deaf, blind, and hard of hearing communities. Sorry, hold on. For example, ODR's Establishment Act says, in quote, the purpose of the office is to advance the civil rights of people with disabilities by coordinating the district's ADA compliance program and by ensuring and overseeing district-wide compliance with the ADA and related disability laws. MODDH's Establishment Act says the purpose of MODDH is to advance the civil rights of the deaf, blind, and hard of hearing communities by ensuring and overseeing district-wide compliance with laws that affects the deaf, blind, and hard of hearing communities. ODR and MODDH both hold mandates that focus on ensuring district agency compliance with law and federal disability laws. Further, the section of the code governing the district's ADA compliance program requires all agencies to submit separate self-evaluation and implementation plans to both ODR and MODDH. In contrast, DDS Establishment Act is located within Title VII, Human Healthcare and Safety of the DC Code, and DDS is also structured under the Deputy Mayor for Health and Human Services, and DDS mission focuses on delivery of services and supports to individuals with intellectual or developmental disabilities. I guess considering all of that, Director, do you think ODR would be at least as appropriate of a location for your office as DDS would be?
Excuse me. Thank you. While I can't speak to the appropriateness, all I can see are the positives, right? All I can see is the benefit of the move to DDS when it comes to the legal support. As I mentioned before, they have an entire legal team. Who better to assist us with compliance than being able to tap into some of the great legal minds that the district was able to recruit within the government. Additionally, the collaboration to a larger agency, right? ODR has smaller staff, is probably comparable to the Mayor's Office of Deaf, Blind, and Hard of Hearing. DDS has hundreds of staff. And so being better able to rely on the wide breadth of resources and services. Additionally, I see that the being housed within intellectual and developmental disabilities as a pro, because right now we are very focused on deaf, blind, and hard of hearing as our office title states. But that also sometimes means that we have to figure out how do we make sure we don't ignore the deaf disabled community, right? Deaf people with intellectual or mental health or other developmental and neurodivergent identities. And so being housed within Department of Disability Services, we have that resource right there. All I see are the pros and the benefits.
Thank you for that. And just one more in this area, I just have to make my record clear. Thank you for being a good sport here, Director. Another area of concern with putting MODDH within DDS is conflict of interest. MODDH is a compliance agency, meaning it has the legal authority and duty to report instances of district agencies' noncompliance with local and federal disability laws. Given that DDS is the primary agency within the district government that directly serves people with disabilities, my concern is putting the Office of Deaf, Blind, and Hard of Hearing within DDS puts the office in an unfair position of reporting on an agency of which you are a part of. There is a reason inspector generals are independent from the agencies they oversee. There is a reason the ombudsperson for children is not just outside of CFSA, but outside of the executive branch. There is even a reason ODR is not within DDS or any other agency. I think the government and the public are best served when offices that conduct oversight over other governmental entities are separate structurally and budgetarily. And I'm not saying DDS violates the law. I'm not saying DDS would ask you, your office, not to report potential instances of noncompliance. Absolutely, I believe in fidelity that DDS and its leadership would not do that. However, the point here is that we can't set up conflicts of interest of that nature, even even if we know sort of the fidelity of the office as it is right now. And so I just want to note the existence of what I see as an inevitable conflict of interest within this proposal. The bottom line for me, Director, is I think the views of deafblind, and hard of hearing communities is the most important consideration when looking at the mayor's proposal. And I think it is clear from in hearing and public testimony, there is a consensus DDS absorbing MODA is not what is best for the agency, and therefore is not what is best for the agency's constituents. And so I hope to work together as the council considers the committee of the whole, what we will do next. And I mean that and genuinely and truly, I want us to have a real conversation about what is the better and best fit, because I will not be moving forward in my committee report with the recommendation that MODA is going into DDS. As you know, the last year, this committee added an additional FTE to implement the fiscal year 25 title that requires MODA to process and fulfill requests for interpreter services made to the council. I'm so grateful for your office's work, working with us to do that. Do you have a sense of how many requests MODA has processed for the council so far? And under the agency's MOU with the council, how much has MODA spent on these requests?
All right. Excuse me, I have a cold.
Me too.
Not fun. Thank you so much. I'm honored to be here today. So I do want to express thank you so much. We are very happy with the new addition FTE in our office. So far, we have filled about 800 requests up until now, and we have obligated about 400,000 with about 300 or 289,000 that is to come within the next couple of weeks.
Understood. I'm very appreciative, MODA, of taking on this role. I think that important work is highly evident today with the time and effort you all spend ensuring the logistics of making this hearing accessible. As you know, I wanted MODA to do this work because you know better than anyone how to make government accessibility for people who are deaf, deafblind, and deaf, disabled, late deafened, and hard of hearing. And so I just wanted to make sure that this is work that we can continue, and that the FTE that we put in is something that we need to retain and ensure continues to be fully funded. And is that your understanding or your office's position?
That FTE was in the budget for, that you just mentioned, that was placed in there in
Yeah.
FY25 to continue to 26. That is correct.
Yeah, and based on the work you've done thus far, do you feel that that FTE is needed to continue to do that work?
I absolutely do agree that that FTE is pertinent to carrying on this work that we're doing in our office.
Got it. Go ahead.
I can also add, in the past week alone, we had 57 requests in 1 week. So just to emphasize, it's absolutely needed and necessary.
Okay. My other question regarding that was, given the position was added to improve accessibility on the council, I'm wondering if there are additional ways outside of fulfilling the request that the position could be assigned. I was wondering if you would be open to discussing how this council dedicated position can be focused on improving accessibility across all aspects of the council's ECP.
We're always open to discussing how we can make sure we improve services for all residents, whether that be those who work specifically for DC Council requests or others. So always open to what works best for the community.
Got it. In your testimony, you mentioned monitoring compliance with the Open Movie Captioning Requirement Amendment Act of 2024. I want to thank you and your team for including the council and the DC premiere of the president now, which included a panel discussion about this law. I highly recommend anyone who has not done so already watch this incredibly powerful film that portrays an important moment in history for the district and the national and international disability rights movement as a whole. I know theaters were not too happy with the law when it was first introduced. My question is, how is compliance going? Are theaters offering the number of open caption viewings that they are supposed to? And are there any barriers to compliance or anything council needs to do from an oversight or legislative perspective to help?
In partnership with the Office of Human Rights, I do agree at first it was kind of like a little bit of a hesitancy, but I do see I have anecdata where it was beneficial. For example, people were mentioning that there were, because DC was one of the few, if only regionally, with the open caption requirement, there were people who were planning day trips from Philadelphia to see Sinners, for example, in open caption. So that is definitely something where I see it as boosting the local economy, because what that means is we're providing a resource that other states and other jurisdictions do not provide. That means more people want to come to DC, and that only is just enhancing our comeback. As far as compliance, in partnership with the Office of Human Rights, we had one complaint very early, like maybe the first week of its implementation, that was quickly rectified, and then after that, I have not received any ensuing complaints. Yeah, I'm thinking in my head, I haven't received any ensuing complaints. So compliance has been working out pretty well.
Oh, great. That's great to hear. Please keep the committee updated as this work continues to happen. During the performance oversight, we talked about agencies needing to submit self-evaluation and implementation plans to MODDHH. What is the update on this effort, and have any agencies done so or begun completing them so far? Similarly, has your office made any referrals to the Office of Human Rights for agencies' non-compliance with any local or federal disability laws?
We do have constituents who make who want to file official lawsuits. And while we cannot do official investigation, we do have made references for constituents to follow up with OHR to maybe file an official complaint. If so, that they may want to follow up with a lawsuit. Our hope, though, is that when they file a complaint with OHR, it avoids any legal need, because OHR has been really great with addressing the needs immediately in our experience and as far as we are aware. That being said, as it relates to the agency self-evaluation plan, I don't believe we have any delays with that. The official deadline is 1 month after the fiscal year, right? To making sure that they have time to collect all their data. We have already had a training with the ADA coordinators across the district. So that's been really well. We've been able to work out some of the tech issues. The evaluation form is on QuickBase. So as a platform, technology can be touch and go. So we were thrilled to be able to work on that now, so that they have about 4 or 5 months before the deadline, if anything comes up, to address any issues. So far, we've only heard positive things about the evaluation itself, keeping in mind that it may change. It's our first year doing it, so based on the information, based on ensuing concerns constituents may bring to the table, we may have to modify it, but I don't envision a huge significant change.
Thank you for that. Director, I think that's all the questions I have for you. Is there anything else you would like to leave on the record as far as the budget goes?
Not at this time. I'm absolutely grateful to the staff within the Mayor's Office of Deaf, Blind, and Hard of Hearing who work tirelessly every day. You mentioned that they came in early, that session didn't start until 10:30. They were here at 8 o'clock, making sure that things were set up ahead of time. And this is just one example of the many ways in which they show up for DC residents. So I do want to take this time to give a big thank you and kudos to my team over the Mayor's Office of Deaf, Blind, and Hard of Hearing.
Wonderful. Thank you all for your testimonies and your service to the District of Columbia. We will now take a 5-minute break before moving to the Department of Disability Services. Our first panel, give it a second. Are we doing something? Okay, we'll work out this glitch while I go to the bathroom.
That's just wild, that the disincentive to have meeting is usually amendments. Like that's the
I know.
path of resistance, just not.
Truly. That's what I said. Okay. I look appropriate, as much as appropriate can look. We are now reconvening our hearing, and we are now to the Department on Disability Services, starting with our public witnesses. Our first panel of witnesses are Grace Audrick, public witness. Audrick, that's what I was thinking it was, and I was okay. Titus Hodges, public witness. Dr. Stanley Harris, public witness. All right, we're going to begin with this panel, and then we'll team project action. We're going to have a whole project action panel as our second panel, so hold tight there. Miss Grace, how are you? Good morning or afternoon, child. See, my head is in morning.
I'm doing fine.
Doing
thank you.
fine, wonderful.
How are you?
I'm doing okay. Getting through this cold, but it's all good. You may begin your testimony.
Okay. To the Madam Chair and members of the DC Council, please, peace and blessings. I am Grace Odrick, originally from Camden, New Jersey. I came to Washington, DC in 1987 and currently reside in Ward 2. Please allow me to tell how the Department on Disability Service, DDS, has been a significant part of my life at the young age of 62. I sit before you today in recovery for what seems like a lifetime of trauma. I went from being a superstar basketball player at Camden High School in 1981. I was South Jersey's leading female basketball scorer, averaging 27.1 points a game. I was the female Charles Barkley. But now, to losing my mind, walking the streets of Washington, D.C. in much confusion. I was struggling with my sexual identity and being born and raised being a member of a very well-known, which I call a Jim Jones type religious cult, whose headquarters is right here in D.C. Some of my family members were even raped as children. I gave and surrendered my mind, body, money, life, and soul to this cult. I was brainwashed to believe that this was the only way to heaven by being a member. The bishops were my Lord, Master, Comforter, and Saviors. But I thank God that I learned through the Rehabilitation Service Administration, RSA, Vocational Rehabilitation, VR program, way back in 1991. Yes, from 92 to right now. Well, I would go back and forth to RSA for years during my many breakdowns. But today, right at this very second, as a client, my mental, emotional, and spiritual wounds are being healed. My mind is being restored. I obtained an associate degree in liberal studies from the University of the District of Columbia's Community College. Go Firebirds on May 2024. I am now pursuing a BA degree in political science. I made a vow to God that I would advocate for myself as well as others, that no matter how deep or bad you may assume your circumstances appear, that there is always a better way. I made a vow to influence the policymakers. I made a vow to God to have the courage and love to tell my story every chance I could. I made a vow to be an example of hope, not shame or fear, by being gracefully bold and assertively letting the world know there are liars spreading stigmas regarding mental illnesses. Don't give up, my people. There are resources available to help you. My final vow to God was to help someone along the way so that my living would not be in vain, because everybody counts in my world. City Council, please keep funding DDS because so many are in need, just like me. We just need guidance, structure, and a plan of action. And before I end my testimony, I thank God for my RSA counselor, Ms. Catherine Smith. Ms. Smith would not let me give up. She saw the potential and beauty in me before I realized it myself. When I prayed for help, God sent Ms. Smith in my life through the DDS VR program. I thank you so much for your attention, and may God guide you as one of the voices for the disabled residents of Washington, D.C. I thank you so much. Go Firebirds.
Go Firebirds. Thank you so much. Next, we'll hear from Dr. Stanley Harris.
Good afternoon, Chairperson Louis George and members of the council. My name is Dr. Stanley Harris. I'm a native Washingtonian, a supporter of the Family Support Council, and the full-time caregiver of my younger brother, Byron Harris, who has Down syndrome, a great sense of humor like his handsome African-American over 21 brother in the crisp suit before you right now, and he loves the routine disability services provide. The proposed budget cuts to disability services are deeply alarming. These aren't abstract numbers, these are lifelines for families like mine. Byron receives in-home support, 1 day a week of physical fitness through SWAT, individualized day support through St. John's Community Services, and day habilitation through Project Redirect. He also receives respite care when I need coverage and nutrition services critical to his well-being. Together, these services help maintain his routine, keep him safe and supported, and integrate him into his community. If these services are cut or even disrupted, it's not just Byron who suffers, it's me as his caregiver, our community, and the public systems that are forced to react to the consequences. There are more than 76,000 DC residents with disabilities, 1 in 10 of us, and most live in households under financial strain. Cutting home and community-based services in this moment is not only unjust, it's fiscally reckless. According to the Centers for Medicare and Medicaid Services, community-based care costs 62% less than institutional care and leads to better outcomes. Now layer in the broader threat. DC could lose its enhanced federal Medicaid match, dropping from 70% to 50%. That would strip $2.1 billion from our healthcare infrastructure. Add to that local proposals to shift 25,000 residents out of Medicaid eligibility and into basic plans. The system is being squeezed from both ends. And let's not forget, 285,000 DC residents rely on Medicaid, including more than 27,000 people with disabilities. Mayor Bowser's fiscal year proposal rightly adds $8.3 million for disability services, but we need that commitment reflected now before damage is done. The Family Support Council, established under DC Code Section 7-761-12, to ensure families like mine have a seat at the table. Today, I'm using that seat to say protect what matters. I urge you to, 1, reject cuts, 2, fully fund home and community-based supports, and 3, center real families in these decisions. Disability rights are civil rights. Budget justice is disability justice, and DC should stand for civil rights and disability justice. Thank you so much for this opportunity to testify before you.
Thank you so much both for your testimony. We will now move to our second panel of witnesses. Next, we will hear from Ricardo Thornton, Senior, Project Action. Robert Kennedy Jr., Project Action. Leonard Stevens, Project Action. Lindsay Wilkes, Project Action. Angie Shelby, Chairperson of DC Developmental Disabilities Council. It's Ricardo who always here. Now, Mr. Thornton, where's my girl Donna? I'm gonna let you testify, but usually I need to see Donna with you. Right now, anyways, good afternoon, Mr. Thornton. You may begin your testimony.
Yeah, Donna says hello to everyone. I knew it was coming. I love it. Good afternoon, Madam Chair and members of the Committee on Facilities. My name is Ricardo Thornton, and I am the co-president of Project Action, Self-Advocacy Coalition. I serve on many committees, including Advocacy of Public Policy Committee of the DC Advocacy of Public Policy Committee of the DD Council, Development Disability Council. And I serve on a number of coalitions. I'm gonna briefly go through this. I probably won't stay in line in order, but I'm gonna go through it. My wife, Donna, and I are former residents of Forest Haven. We both now living in the community. We live in Ward 4, where we vote at Ward 4. We work, Donna works at, used to work at Walter Reed Medical Center in DC, and she's been working for over 30 years. I worked at the Martin Luther King Memorial Library, where I'm still there presently today. 49 years of services. No interest of retirement yet. I just love what I do. I am here to support the increase. I'm sorry. Project Action's motto is to let our voice be heard. I am here to let my voice be heard today. And I also want to say, Madam Chair, is that Thomas Manglam, who's not here today with us, always reminds me to say that we have 2 of everything on our board of Project Action. We have 2 co-chairs and 2 vice chairs. So in honor of Thomas, just want to make sure I put that out there. I'm here to support the increase in the FY 2026 budget to serve residents with disabilities. In its difficult time in DC. We need to make sure we do not let disability rights get taken away. We cannot, and I repeat that, we cannot go back to institution settings and looking at that as an result. We must continue to help all people with disabilities live in the community. We making our commitment and making our lives better. I think the DDS budget should be increased even more. We need better support for services providers. We need some good providers in DC who are working hard, but they are struggling. I want to see providers get people out more and give them help that they need to do it to live a good life. Providers does not have enough money to pay good staff. Always a turnaround changing in that process. People depend on their staff to live, and providers are always being asked to cut their budget. People with disabilities are suffering because of this. What happens? I'm just going to go briefly into it, and it says here, what happened with the federal government cuts is also going to have an impact on disability communities in DC. The federal government is trying to cut funds that pays for Georgetown University Legal Services for Excellence, for the Developmental Disability Council that provide those services, and to our quality trusts and protection and advocacy. These services means a lot to us because they have done a lot of work reaching out, going that extra mile when sometimes we can't get good services at DDS. They go to them for support, and they really, really reach out. Not just, it would be really sad to see something like that go and just be wasted. So I'm encouraging the federal government to not cut this budget, but restore funds that they can continue to do the great work that they have done over the past. And also I'm saying, also I want to say that I'm hoping that the district will be able to use all of its funding in FY26 and not have to be hesitant to become build and give, strike and give back on the hill. I took a class many years ago, class of 2012, I graduated. And it was DC advocacy, I hope I got that word right, DC advocacy policy. And that class was about moving things forward. Bills that sits up on Capitol Hill should not be on Capitol Hill. It should be brought back to the city, signed, ready to continue the great works here in the district. I want to thank you, Madam Chair, and the Mayor, and all of you for the work that you all have done, and encourage us to continue the great works here in the District of Columbia. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Absolutely. Thank you. Robert Kennedy, Jr., Project Action, good to see you. It's a great time to be a Kennedy, huh?
That's what I said. I mean, first no. First off, good morning.
Good morning. Good afternoon.
Yeah, good. I say good morning because California is morning time anyway.
That's right.
So you say afternoon, but California. But real fast. I thought you could call me first. That's why I said way down here. I'm sorry, I don't have no paperwork. Real fast. I used to work at the Natural Relations Board for 38 years, doing supplies. I worked with RCM of Washington, for 16 years, okay? Why, also I'm here, I'm sorry, I put that paperwork too, but certain, person don't have my thing. But my thing is right now is where DDS budget, I don't really want to have a cut because my age, like I said, where my going to the doctor, going to the children and stuff like that, where if it be cut, everything's be going. I know everything's going by numbers, but different things where we need to have everything is stronger. Where I say we're going to the doctor because where my it's going to be paid and all that stuff. Also, have people coming to my home, helping me in my house, like cutting grass, cooking, or all that. If that's a cut, yeah, I don't have nobody to come in, but we're helping me on doing stuff. When I get a little older, it's going to be a little harder. Because I just had fell October 23rd. I had a new hip. But if I get a little older and whatever, I can't even go, can't even do things, and stuff like that. Can't do where it's supposed to be. I try not to pan on people, but right now I got to do what I'm supposed to be doing right now. I just trying to say it's less DDS, help me, don't cut things where it's supposed to be, and let, I mean, not let it rise, but let things where my age and the children be wanted to really be helpful. Thank you.
Absolutely. Thank you so much for your testimony. Next, we'll hear from Leonard Stevens, Project Action.
Okay, my name is Nancy Wilkes from 1 DC. I'm Ward 2. Ward 2. I live with my mother. My mother's 90 years old. She retired, but I retired 40 years. And that did came back, help out the coach to help up people ability. I will keep on doing that, help people ability, help them out. They can get, I would say, they can be like me, speak like I'm doing, and they get their word out. I like what I'm doing. My work, I like what I'm doing. I love what I'm doing. I love it. And you got a question for me, let me know. And if I can, let me know.
Thank you so much. Now we will hear from Angie Shelby. Good afternoon. Good to see you again.
Good afternoon, Chairperson Lewis, George, and others, members of the community. My name is Angie D. Shelby, and I am the Chairperson of the DD Council. I'm also a Ward 6 voter and advocate for persons with disabilities and seniors, and I have received service from RSA. Today, I'm testifying on behalf of the DD Council about DDS. The DD Council partners closely with DDS on several initiatives, including Employment First, the Supporting Families Community on Practice, Developmental Disability Awareness Month, and the annual Latino Conference on Disabilities. DDS is a member of the DD Council, and we enjoy a positive working relationship in our programs and advocacies. One of the DD Council's consistent concerns is still the direct care work crisis. We are happy that the Direct Service Professionals Payment Rate Act of 2020 will be funded in the fiscal year 2026, but it is not enough. We must continue working towards a higher quality and higher value DSPS workforce. Vacancy rates in the DDA system continue to be unacceptable, and the people suffering the most are people with disabilities and their families. For a person receiving services, having reliability and compatibility, DSPS is essential to have a good working life. Investing more in DSPs will improve services in our community. We want to briefly address issues being debated on the national level that affect us locally. The DD Council role is to strengthen the voice and presence of people with disability and their families in support of great independence, inclusion, empowerment,
Ms.
and
Angie, can you move the mic closer to you? I just want everybody to hear you. Thank you.
and policy and the effects of their lives. We are federally funded and are pleased to report that the President's proposed fiscal year 2026 budget includes a flat funding for the DD councils. However, we are deeply concerned that this is the same budget, that the same budget eliminates one of our sisters programs in the DD network, the University Center of Excellence in Development Disabilities, housed at Georgetown University. Our nation's Association of Councils on Disabilities, the values and visions of the DD Act calls for a unified approach to disability rights and excuse me, and proceeds with has been an internal part of advancing research policies and services and supports for people with developmental disabilities. The DD Council, the Protection and Advocacy Program at the Disability Rights DC, and at UCELDD at Georgetown working together, using our unique strengths to support DC residents with DD and with families in making DC a place where we all can thrive. The Georgetown UCEDD is an essential support system for DC, and we will continue to advocate with them. In closing, it is important to acknowledge that the disability community is facing threats to life-straining services, healthcare, employment opportunities, and our overall ability to interact in our communities. We understand that many of the changes will be debated on the federal level right now could have effects on DDS and other DC government agencies. We are moved in the future together. We must prioritize services and supports and keep people in the community and enable people to live with dignity. We appreciate the opportunity to testify today. If you have any additional questions, please follow up with the DD Council Executive Director, Allison White.
Thank you so much. Thank you to this panel of witnesses for your testimony. Your testimonies were so thorough. I don't have any questions for you, but I appreciate you speaking on the record and uploading your testimony to the management system if you haven't done so already. Thank you so much. We will now move to our next panel of witnesses. Doreen Blue, Executive Director, Family Voices of DC and the DOTS Group. Robin Schaefer, faculty member, Georgetown University Center for Excellence in Developmental Disabilities. I am Paragol, Executive Director of the DC Coalition on Disability Service Providers, and Sandy Bernstein, the Legal Director, Disability Rights DC at University Legal Services. All to yourself. Nope. All right, I don't see Doreen, so Robin, I'm going to start with you. Good afternoon, and you may begin your testimony.
Good afternoon. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, terrific. My name is Robin Schaffert, and on behalf of the Georgetown University Center for Excellence in Developmental Disabilities, thank you, Chairperson Louis George and members of the committee for the opportunity to testify today. The Georgetown UCID is a federally mandated and funded program of the U.S. Department of Health and Human Services. It's part of a national network of 68 UCIDs that began in 1963 with university centers in every state and in U.S. territories. The Georgetown UCID advances self-determination among the diversity of people with disabilities and their families throughout the life course, promoting equity to ensure their full participation in all aspects of community life. Mayor Bowser asserts that the proposed fiscal year 2026 DC budget advances a transformational growth agenda to attract new businesses, create new jobs, generate new tax revenue, and quickly grow the local economy. The Georgetown UCID strongly supports many of the investments proposed in the budget, including investments in schools, affordable housing, libraries, and recreation centers, and health. Fully funding core child care programs, including the Child Care Subsidy, PKEEP, and the Pay Equity Fund will benefit families and children with and without disabilities across DC and will strengthen the workforce that supports them. The Georgetown USID urges the DC Council to provide similar support to the direct care workforce by continuing the commitments made in the Direct Support Professional Payment Rate Act of 2020. DC's community-based system of supports and services for people with intellectual and developmental disabilities relies on DSPs. These critical workers, overwhelmingly women, people of color, and immigrants, perform complex, highly demanding jobs. These workers deserve the same respect and support that the district provides members of the early childhood workforce. Yet, the mayor proposes to fund DSP wages at the enhanced level only in fiscal year 2025 and to then end the wage enhancement. Freezing wages would risk increasing the already high vacancy and turnover rates in the DSP workforce. As you'll hear in more detail from Mr. Paragal, the vacancy rates for DSPs currently stands at 15%. Not only does this high vacancy rate create a financial and operational burden for service providers, it is also a disservice to the people receiving support. People with disabilities receive higher quality support from workers who know them well and who understand their support needs. Adjusting to new and different support providers can negatively impact people's ability to achieve their goals. According to research by the Paraprofessional Healthcare Institute, at least 27% of direct care workers in the U.S. are immigrants. The federal government's current immigration policies may further shrink the potential pool of direct support professionals, making vacancies even harder to fill. A strong system of community-based supports requires a strong direct support workforce, as the district government recognized when it adopted the DSP Payment Rate Act. The Georgetown USID urges the council to maintain the wage enhancement requirements of the act. Unfortunately, it's necessary to conclude this testimony by informing the committee that the president's FY26 budget proposes eliminating federal funding for the University Centers for Excellence in Developmental Disabilities. Should federal funding be eliminated or reduced, the Georgetown USID hopes that the district government will find ways to continue to support research, training, services, and advocacy to support DC's developmental disability community. Thank you for the opportunity to testify today. I hope I'll be back next year, and I would be happy to answer any questions.
Thank you so much. Next, we will hear from Ian.
Hey there. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Good. Good afternoon, Chairperson Lewis George. Ian Paragal, and I serve as Exec Director of the DC Coalition of Disability Service Providers. I'm sorry I can't be there in person. The DC Coalition currently represents over 50 provider agencies supporting over 2,300 persons with intellectual and developmental disabilities and employing over 7,000 staff. Member organizations provide home and community-based waiver services, as well as intermediate care facility supports, as well as home care, home health services. On behalf of the community providers and the person supported, we are here to express our concerns about the 50% cut to the administrative rate fee, while taking the opportunity to also set the table for the need for future budgetary planning for the DSP wage. Let me start with the admin fee. The FY26 budget proposes a reduction in the admin fee for residential services, also known as the CLIN 8 line item for FY26. This reduction amounts to approximately $1.6 million in savings for the district, a nominal amount at best for the district government operations, but for the harm that this reduction will have within the provider world is substantial. IDD providers have been operating in the red as a result of the unrelenting turnover and vacancy rates in the industry, as mentioned before. Further, IDD providers have demonstrated that funding for supervisory and nursing services is also inadequate versus the DC market. IDD providers have been losing mid-managers and supervisors by the dozens since there has been no funding allocations to increase wage rates for these critical quality assurance cohorts for years. Because IDD supports are mandatory, agencies must pay whatever the market rate dictates in order to secure staffing in order to provide these supports. IDD providers were using the admin fee funding to offset the growing costs of staffing. Last year, the committee, thank you, and the council successfully infused a similar proposed reduction with $900,000 in order to lessen the impact to the industry. That $900,000 resulted in overall 18% reduction in funding for the entire fiscal year. For FY26, the $1.6 million reduction proposed for this line item in the budget pushes human service providers far beyond the dollars that they can afford and destabilizes supports, knocking the annualized fee down by 50%. We ask that this $1.6 million be reinstated in the FY26 budget in order to bring the admin rate back to its FY24 levels. I provided a summary of the development of the DSP Wage Act, the 117.6 factor, the CNA Act of 2024, which incidentally increased that 117 to 120%. All that's provided in my written testimony. So with the limited time I have, I want to highlight why the decision to freeze the direct support of the direct care wage is a concern. And for reference, the district has calculated that the local share of maintaining the original 117.6% calculation for the DSP Wage Act is roughly $26 million for FY27 and $80 million for the 3-year financial period. This workforce is critical to the very operation of the DD waiver, home health, and ICF for services. For these workers, there are no increases built into their wages for the next 3 years, essentially beyond January 2026. So, as the living wage and the minimum wage grow closer and closer to the DSP hourly rates in jobs, the DSPs have no such cap. The hourly rates for the regular market has no such cap. The DSPs do. So what we anticipate that we'll again see an exodus of direct support workers, just as we did in the beginning of 2017. Today, the industry as a whole is just about back to the pre-COVID vacancy rate of about 15%, which incidentally was not too terrific then. A 15% vacancy level equals 7.5% of additional costs on provider labor expenses because of the unfunded overtime that is generated by the vacancies. Because frontline labor expenses equate to about 55% of the average disability provider's entire expense portfolio, this means that disability providers are already saddled with a 4.1 overall loss from the outset if all other silos of funding are presumed to be adequate. Further, those DSP workers are the very workers that the district would love to see escape the rolls of Medicaid. If they can earn a wage that keeps them above that threshold, isn't it a net win-win for spending this money? It's essentially allocating a few more dollars per hour in a comparatively low wage while establishing industry stability in order to avoid the annualized costs of Medicaid enrollment for workers who would be within the eligibility threshold without this DSP supplement. The DC coalition would suggest that such a decision makes a great deal of sense for the district and is worth the investment. Lastly, although the discussion is within my written testimony, we have been on the no adequate funding side of the fence for several years for rental cap allocation, monthly food supply increases, mid-level nursing costs, which continue to escalate in the district. We know times are tight now, but for the providers and the people they support, we've been feeling it for years. Thank you, and I welcome any questions you have.
Thank you. Next, we'll hear from Sandy Bernstein.
Good afternoon, Chairperson Lewis George and members of the Committee on Facilities. My name is Sandy Bernstein, and I'm the Legal Director at Disability Rights DC at University Legal Services. I am a middle-aged white woman wearing glasses, a colorful shirt, and a green blazer. Disability Rights DC is the federally mandated protection and advocacy program for people with disabilities in DC and is also the federally mandated client assistance program. As such, DRDC has represented hundreds of individuals supported by the Developmental Disabilities Administration and the Rehabilitation Services Administration and has assisted even more through our systemic advocacy and investigations. In a tough budget year, DRDC especially appreciates the mayor's budget increase for the Department on Disability Services in fiscal year 26, which will allow DDS to maintain the staffing levels and services for people with disabilities in both DDA and RSA. DDA services and especially Medicaid waiver services are critical for people with intellectual and developmental disabilities who need community-based supports to live meaningful, healthy, and safe lives in the district. And RSA provides critical employment supports and funding, which enables district residents with disabilities to have the training and vocational supports they need to obtain and retain competitive and integrated employment. While DRDC is pleased with the increased wage enhancement for direct support professionals for fiscal year 26, it is concerning that the mayor has proposed freezing the enhancement in future years. Direct support professionals perform a vital service and deserve to be fairly compensated. Without adequate wages, the vacancy rate for DSPs will likely increase, which will directly harm the people DDA supports. With likely staffing shortages, individuals new to DDA services will have a difficult time finding a provider available to support them, and people currently receiving services may be left without the quality staffing support they need. DRDC's clients have already experienced difficulty transitioning to a different provider due to staffing shortages, and the decision to halt the wage enhancement will only make it worse. DRDC wants to thank this committee for its continued support of district residents with disabilities. DRDC implores DDS to utilize their government funding for DDA to serve all district residents who need their support, whether that's a young adult transitioning out of high school, an older adult retiring from work or structured day activities, or individuals who are incarcerated and want the opportunity to apply for community-based services. All are district residents with intellectual and developmental disabilities who deserve and need community-based supports. Thank you for the opportunity to provide this testimony today.
Thank you so much. Robin, I'm so sorry to hear about the federal elimination of the University Centers for Excellence in Developmental Disabilities. Clearly, they have no idea how important and life-changing the work that Georgetown and his fellow centers do for people with developmental disabilities. How much was that federal grant? And has Georgetown provided any information or assurances on if they will step in to cover the cost?
So our grant has not yet been eliminated. It's proposed by the mayor. I don't have the exact figure of the amount of the grant, and the way our grant works is we get a core grant from HHS, and then we're required to leverage that funding through other grants. And currently, the center is working on a very large grant from the state of New York's Office of People with Developmental Disabilities. And then there are other federal grants where we're either the grantee or a sub-grantee, and those are all at risk. And whether Georgetown has any ability to supplement the grant, there's been no commitment to that at this time.
Okay, if you could, can you please keep me and the committee staff updated on the grant?
Absolutely.
Okay. I did want to ask, Ian, it's great to see you again. I hope there is a time in the near future we can talk about something else besides how little money there is for our providers and direct support professionals.
So hopefully. We'll
hopefully. 1.6 million is the cost to restore the cut to administrative fee. I know we weren't able to restore the full cut last year, but we did as much as we could. I'm curious, what were providers unable to do with that 18% reduction to the admin fee last year?
So really, thank you for the question. And we do greatly appreciate you got us back to 82% with your kind assistance and advocacy. It really is just cutting into bottom lines, really. I mean, you wouldn't say, well, we can't do this, we can't do that. It's just they use that money to fund overtime and to be able to pay nurses above market and to be able to have people go on vacations. There's just so many pieces of the pie, and when it gets whittled down, it makes it very difficult to accomplish all of the individual goals as well as the organizational goals to remain sustainable.
Yeah,
it's really kind of like the everything fund. Like, okay, we can from that source in order to be able to fund certain projects or overtime or whatever it might be.
Yeah, understood. We'll see what the committee will see what we can do as best as we can, and try to support in whichever ways that we can as we look at the budget before us today. Sandy, I share your concerns about the lack of adequate funding for DSP and CNA wage acts. This funding is needed, one, because the workers deserve it and are entitled to it, but two, because our entire direct care workforce is at risk if we cannot recruit and retain professional providers. That's just the reality. Our health system has been through so many drastic changes in such a short period of time. So I think it's important for us to sort of think about where we were before the pandemic regarding the state of our direct care workforce. Can you talk about what the system was like and how the vacancy rates back then impacted care for DDA supported persons?
I'm not certainly an expert in sort of the history of DSPs and vacancies, but I've been doing this for a long time, for close to 30 years. And I can tell you that when there is a high vacancy, it results in new people coming into the system. We represent people, we help find them eligible, and then they wait for a while to try to find a provider that can provide the services to them. They have providers who said, yes, I would very much be interested in helping to provide services, but we don't have a vacancy right now, or we don't have enough staff, or this comes up a lot, especially for my clients who need intensive staffing. People who might need one-to-one staffing, meaning a staff with them at all times, or even two-to-one staffing if they have significant behavioral or medical issues. And providers just say, like, we're just barely managing with the staff that we have, and we would love to support your client, but we just can't. And it results in people waiting in institutional placements longer than they have to be. It sometimes results in them ending up with providers that really aren't equipped to handle significant behavioral needs. It's concerning, or you have people working overtime who are really tired, or working a couple of jobs and are really, none of us, no matter how great we are able to do an adequate job if we're tired and overworked. And I think that's what the pressure it puts on direct support professionals who really are doing yeoman's work to support people with disabilities. I represent a client, and the other day I was so impressed with the staff who really sort of got to know my client who has very significant behavioral needs. And they knew them so much more than all the professionals who come to the meeting and who are involved in all the planning. And I think that we have to give direct support professionals the respect that they deserve for really getting to know the people that they support. But the concern is if the wages aren't high enough, they're going to leave, and we're going to lose those folks who really have knowledge and compassion for the people that DDA supports.
I can add a little to that if you'd like too.
Yes, please.
Okay, and Sandy's right on in the impact, especially as it comes to new possible services. If you think about it, if the organization doesn't have adequate staff and they're already operating using a ton of overtime, which is wholly unfunded. Different organizations have funding for overtime. However, DDS does not fund an overtime rate. So it's funded at the base rate. So it's very difficult without the staff for an organization to accept a possible referral or to provide services when they already know from the jump that it's going to be at least half of the time, and that element that I talked about, that percentage, they're going to be taking a loss, and with no real hope of bringing new people in because the wage continues to whittle away, they're going to make an economic decision in that situation.
Yeah.
If I can just add a few words, you asked about the history of the wage. If we go back, I think it's probably 6 or 7 years, there was a time when DC had among the lowest vacancy and turnover rates in the country. And that was because because the wage was higher than the DSP wage rate was higher than the minimum wage. I see Ian smiling, so I think I'm right about this. And then we saw rapidly as the minimum wage and the living wage increased, which is a good thing, and there was no delta between the two, that vacancy and turnover rates increased dramatically in the district.
Yeah. Let me ask you all this before we move to our government witnesses. Any other things that we should be sort of considering and flagging as we move into this very quick budget, through this quick budget process for markup? Any other things that we need to be sort of looking at, considering as a committee as we go into markup?
I would just like to express, great concern over the possible elimination of funding of the USAID. My office is a member of the triad with them and the DD Council. We were originally targeted in a leaked document to be eliminated also, and it appears we're not anymore. We have 3 of our federal grants are on the proposed list to be eliminated, and one of our grants to be reduced 65%. And so I just think, making sure that there are enough advocacy and policy organizations, if it's not funded through the feds, people with disabilities need advocates like the USAID, like my office, people who are out there looking out for people with disabilities. And it is concerning. Hopefully it won't happen to the USAID and it won't happen to our office. One of our grants is the Client Assistance Program, which is the one who helps people who get vocational rehabilitation services. There's no other agency in the city that provides services to all people who get vocational rehabilitation services and have difficulty with those services. So I just think it's important as a committee just to, if it's not us and it's not the USAID, that there are some advocates out there that are funded to help people with disabilities.
Yeah.
I'll add on my agreement on funding the USAID. I sit on the advisory board of that group as well. It's a very broad-based, essentially think tank that works on policy and bettering the lives of district residents. So there's a way to find some in-house funding for that. I think it would be a wise decision.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Thank you. Thank you to this panel of witnesses. We will now move to our government witnesses. Here with us today is Andrew Reese, who is the Director of the Department on Disability Services. All right. It is Director, it is great to see you. And I know your AFO is here with you. Can you all please raise your right hands? Do you swear and affirm under penalty of perjury that the testimony you're about to give to Committee on Facilities is the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth? Thank you so much. You may begin your testimony.
Thank you very much. Good afternoon, Chairperson Louis George, staff of the Committee on Facilities. I am Andrew Reese, Director of the Department on Disability Services, DDS. And with me today is Anthony Young, the DDS Agency Fiscal Officer. The mission of DDS is to provide innovative, high-quality services and supports that enable people with disabilities to lead meaningful lives as vital members of their families, schools, workplaces, and communities in every neighborhood of the District of Columbia. On behalf of Mayor Muriel Bowser, I'm pleased to provide testimony today on the Mayor's fiscal year 2026 proposed budget and financial plan. On May 27, 2025, Mayor Bowser presented her proposed Grow DC budget and financial plan for FY26. This budget includes important investments in transformational growth, right-sizing of spending, and investments in shared priorities, including public schools, public safety, and affordable housing. The budget also continues to reflect the mayor's commitment to supporting people with disabilities in DC. While recognizing DDS as a major cost driver for the district in FY27, Mayor Bowser's budget provides a 15% local funds increase for the fiscal year. This $22.4 million enhancement is provided primarily to support wages for direct support professionals and to meet the projected Medicaid waiver growth in the intellectual and developmental disabilities and individual and family support waivers. It also includes the increase of approximately 1.8 million related to the transfer of the Office of Deaf, Deafblind, and Hard of Hearing to DDS's budget. While the mayor's proposed budget for DDS is strong and ensures the continued availability of services to all people currently supported and those who will require services in the future, it is essential that we take steps over the next year to ensure sustainability of these services for our community. Sustainability will look different across the administrations within DDS. For the Developmental Disabilities Administration, sustainability will mean working toward cost containment within the two waivers, including the implementation of innovative service delivery methods like remote supports that provides both cost savings for the agency and greater independence for the people we support. For the Rehabilitation Services Administration, sustainability means reviewing provider rates that have remained essentially unchanged over the last 10 years and ensuring that our rates are sufficient to support the continued high quality of services that we demand for the people we support. The mayor's proposed FY26 total budget for DDS is $231,855,614, which is an overall 12% increase from last year's approved budget. This includes a 15.7% increase in local funds from $142,523,234 in FY25 to $164,936,319 in FY26. The proposed budget also includes $379,251 in federal grant funds, approximately $16.6 million in anticipated federal Medicaid payments, and approximately $13.9 million in special purpose revenue. The proposed FY26 budget funds 444.28 FTEs. This is an increase of 9.08 FTEs from FY25. Our proposed FTEs include 111.03 within agency management, 160 in the Developmental Disabilities Administration, 90.5 in the Rehabilitation Services Administration, 62 within the Disability Determination Division, and 8.75 within the Office of Deaf, Deafblind, and Hard of Hearing. We also fund 12 financial operations positions with the Office of the Chief Financial Officer. Other than the addition of staff from ODDHH, there have been no substantive staffing changes within our administrations, and no restructuring has taken place within the agency. The agency currently has 57 vacancies, 2 of which have received EOM approval for hiring and are in active recruitment. Of the 57 vacancies, 29 positions are 100% federally funded vacancies, and of that 29, 24 are vacancies within DDD that are on hold pending Social Security Administration approval. 12 positions are 80% federally funded in RSA. 8 of those are on hold pending EOM approval, and 4 are on hold for vacancy savings. 11 positions are locally funded positions in multiple areas of the agency, of which 7 are on hold pending EOM approval, and 4 positions are on hold for vacancy savings. The 2 remaining vacancies are OCFO positions that are on hold for vacancy savings. Positions pending EOM approval are in the recruitment process. These positions require approval prior to a final offer being made. However, the agency does continue its recruitment efforts. Within the Developmental Disabilities Administration, the proposed FY26 budget for DDA is $172,781,033. This represents an increase of over 15% from the FY25 approved budget of $149,701,129. It continues to fully fund all services under the purview of this administration and maintains DC as one of the few states in the nation that does not have a waiting list for IDD services. DDA's proposed budget is $149,269,571 in local funds, approximately $12.3 million in special purpose revenue, and approximately $11.1 million in Medicaid payments. DDA operates 2 Medicaid home and community-based services, or HCBS waivers. The IDD HCBS waiver for people with intellectual and developmental disabilities provides 23 services and supports to more than 1,900 adults with intellectual and developmental disabilities in their own homes and in integrated community-based settings. DDA also operates the Individual and Family Supports, or IFS, HCBS waiver, which focuses on people who do not require residential supports and can leverage support from family or friends to meet their needs. The IFS HCBS waiver provides 18 services and supports to 87 adults with intellectual and developmental disabilities. The IDD and IFS HCBS waivers comprise 74% of DDS's local budget to cover the district's share of the cost of these waiver services. In FY26, that local share is projected to be $121,481,145 for the two waivers, which includes the DSP wage enhancement of $11,526,290. It's an approximately $9 million increase, reflecting anticipated Medicaid waiver growth. Over the last 10 years, the percentage growth in waiver expenditures has outpaced inflation. Given the lower projected revenues for the district and in order to sustain services and continue to provide supports, the agency will begin working with stakeholders this summer to identify the drivers of rising costs and strategize ways to contain costs in anticipation of a waiver amendment in FY27 in order to continue providing supports to every person who needs them. The Direct Supports Professional Payment Rate Act of 2022 requires the district to support raising the direct support professional's average wage to 117.6% of the living wage. This is funded through December 2025 through the use of American Rescue Plan Act, ARPA funding. The FY26 budget includes an $11.5 million enhancement to fully fund the wage through June 2026. If the living wage increases in July 2026, there are not sufficient funds to increase the waiver rates at that time. In FY26, DDS's residential costs are budgeted at $29.2 million. This is an increase of 7% from the $27.3 million budgeted in FY25. Included in this budget is the $336 annual clothing budget for people receiving residential supports. In fiscal year 2025, DDS reduced the administrative fees payable under the human care agreements that reimburse providers occupancy and other residential supports. This funding was partially restored by the council in a one-time enhancement. This enhancement was not annualized, and providers will see the reduction to administrative fees in FY26. DDA supports 1,092 people in waiver-funded residential settings. Of those, 102, or 9.3%, reside in a post home, 80, or 7.3%, are in residential habilitation placements, 912, or 83.4%, are in supported living placements. Most of the people supported in DDA residential settings live in wards 4, 5, and 7, where the DDA cap on rental costs compares favorably with the HUD fair market value. There are two wards, wards 1 and 6, where the DDA rental cap is below the HUD fair market rate, which is calculated by zip code within the district. When necessary, exceptions are made to the DDA rental cap based on individual needs. For example, a person in a wheelchair may need an apartment with additional square footage to allow them to maneuver around and transfer to furniture. Residential supports are funded using 3 distinct revenue streams. The first is special purpose revenue, which takes the form of contribution to costs each person makes, often using their Social Security SSI or SSDI benefits. In the FY26 proposed budget, special purpose revenue accounts for $12,345,234. Special purpose revenue is only sufficient, however, for a portion of the residential costs. The maximum monthly SSI payment is currently $967 a month. $814 of this is contributed to fund residential supports. The second funding source is Medicaid earnings from indirect cost recovery and administrative claiming. This accounts for approximately 25% of the cost of residential supports, or $6,678,879. The remaining $10,150,679 is covered by local funds. In FY26, DDS will realize a savings of $175,900 by eliminating our contract with a vendor to conduct the National Core Indicators Survey. The National Core Indicators Intellectual and Developmental Disabilities, NCI, is a national collaborative effort to measure and improve performance of public developmental disability agencies. DDS will continue to participate in the NCI service, but will use in-house staff to support this work, as we have done in the past. An additional impact of the mayor's proposed FY26 budget relates to changes being made to the DC Healthcare Alliance in response to proposals in the current House version of the Congressional Budget Reconciliation Bill. These changes would end new admissions to the Healthcare Alliance for adults 21 and over, effective August 2025, and terminate services for people over the age of 21 by fiscal year 2028. DDS currently supports fewer than 5 people whose eligibility is based on their enrollment in the DC Healthcare Alliance. We will continue to work with the Department of Healthcare Finance to monitor the status of this legislation and take all possible steps to continue services or transition people to other appropriate supports. Lastly, the telehealth initiative, which was initially funded through ARPA, will be continued in FY26. This is accomplished in part by adding telehealth to the waiver services available under the IDD-HCBS waiver. The Health Assessment and Coordination, HAC telehealth service is intended for individuals undergoing urgent or emergency clinical events. This service is an extension to Medicaid state plan telehealth services for people enrolled in the IDD waiver program residing in host home, residential habilitation, and supported living residential settings. The HAC telehealth service is a monthly subscription service. The monthly unit covers unlimited access and unlimited calls to specialized physicians, physician assistants, and nurse practitioners for assessment and appropriate intervention. The actual provision of medical care is provided as a state plan service through DC Medicaid. Under the Rehabilitation Services Administration budget, RSA's proposed FY26 budget is $22,123,448. This is a 7% increase from its approved FY25 budget of $20,485,409. RSA provides supports that are 78.7% federally funded with a 21.3% local share and a required maintenance of effort in the vocational rehabilitation grant. Maintenance of effort requires that local funding maintain the local funds expended during the last closed out fiscal year. For FY26, this means we must maintain local spending at the same amount expended in FY24. The supports provided by RSA include vocational rehabilitation services, supported employment, independent living services, and independent living older blind services. RSA's budget also includes the Assistive Technology Grant, which is currently a pass-through to the district's Assistive Technology Center at Disability Rights DC at University Legal Services. Federal grants account for $17,507,117 of RSA's budget, which is an increase from the proposed budget based on an unanticipated cost of living increase to the VR grant implemented by the Department of Education in April 2025. Local funds account for $4,931,877. RSA's budget also anticipates that the administration will receive approximately $1.6 million in special purpose revenue collected through commission payments from vending machine income in all federal and district buildings, paid either directly to individual Randolph-Shepard vendors or as quarterly pension payments to eligible vendors. The Workforce Innovation and Opportunity Act of 2014, WIOA, included a requirement that 15% of the federal vocational rehabilitation grant be reserved for funding pre-employment transition services for eligible and potentially eligible students under the age of 22. Under pre-ETS, there are 5 required activities, which include job exploration counseling, work-based learning experiences, counseling on opportunities for enrollment in comprehensive transition or post-secondary educational programs, workplace readiness training to develop social skills and independent living, and instruction in self-advocacy, which may include peer mentoring. The requirement to reserve 15% of the federal grant for pre-ETS, along with the maintenance of effort requirement for local funds, has created significant pressure for RSA. However, the proposed budget is sufficient to meet the needs of every person supported by RSA in FY26. Within RSA, we have the Disability Determination Division. We are the host agency for DDD, which is the district office in which Social Security Administration's review and determination of Social Security disability claims takes place. This operation is 100% federally funded with a proposed FY26 budget of approximately $12.8 million. This budget is an estimate based on likely workload. Still, there is a mechanism for allowing an increase in federal funds in the event that DDD needs additional funding. Thank you very much, Chairperson Louis George, for the opportunity to share our vision for FY26. We at DDS appreciate your thoughtful engagement and partnership. Thank you also to our providers and staff. Their resilience, skill, and compassion continue to drive our mission of full inclusion for people with disabilities. They embody person-centeredness every day. That person-centered spirit is shared by our community of self-advocates, family members, and other partners who challenge us to deliver on the promise of our mission now and in the future, including engaging with us in next year to examine how we can manage costs and ensure sustainability of our services. We at DDS know that we are never alone in pursuing our mission, and there's no more authentic form of support than the honest, thoughtful feedback that our stakeholders continue to provide. Finally, I would like to thank Mayor Bowser. The budget before this committee is the manifestation of a profound commitment to ensuring full inclusion of people with disabilities on the part of the mayor. That abiding commitment is lockstep with the commitment that defines our staff and provider communities, is part of why people with disabilities are and will continue to be integral participants in the district's growth. This concludes my testimony, and I'm happy to answer any questions you may have.
Thank you so much, Dr. Reese. I really do appreciate your thorough testimony and receiving it, because you answered so many questions that we had within the testimony, which I think is great. Should make this more efficient, but knock on wood, anytime people say that, it always goes. So first, and I think you answered this with the telehealth, but maybe the budget chapter notes a decrease of about 98,000 due to the expiration of American Rescue Plan Act funds. What were these ARPA funds used for last year? And are the expiring federal funds being made up in local dollars, or are the uses being discontinued?
We had two separate funding streams for our telehealth initiative.
That's
one
right.
that came through the mayor's office and one that came through the HCBS ARPA funds. And as I said, we are continuing our telehealth efforts, both through some amendments to our waiver and ensuring that there are local funds to continue.
Got it. That's what I figured when you said that in your testimony. I see, is there an enhancement of 17,500 for local travel?
I'm sorry,
I saw an enhancement of 17,500 for local travel.
Yes, that is part of the overall enhancement or restoration, actually, of funds for local travel.
Oh, okay. So it's restoration funding. I got you. Okay.
That's correct.
Understood. I see a 3.8 million or 61% increase for energy, communications, and building rentals. Is this due to the mayor's proposed changes to use the Sustainable Energy Trust Fund to pay for the district's electric bills?
The increase is based on the DDS estimates. So we actually get those DGS estimates, and that's what we actually reflected here in the budget. But I'm not sure if it's going back or whether it's part of the energy fund.
Energy fund, okay. And then are there any decreases to DDS's communications or rental budgets?
The actual changes that have to do with the overall budget based on the DGS estimates, we would actually be able to break those down. We have, within our budget, we have a change to electricity based on the DGS forecast of $681,000, $681. That's a decrease. We have a decrease in rental land and structures of 2.4 million. That's again based on DGS estimates for 26.
Okay.
We also have a second adjustment based on the rental land and structures, which is moved down to our RSA area of $929,000. Again, those are DGS estimates. Two others are an adjustment overall for maintenance and repairs for auto. It winds up being a $4,000 net change increase. We actually have security services that, again, a net change of $1,308, again, based on our DGS forecast. So
Understood.
that addresses all of our utilities.
Got it. Okay. I also see one thing you brought up, auto repair. Does DDS have its own fleet or access to government vehicles?
We do have 4 vehicles. 4 vehicles.
4 vehicles are part of your fleet. Got it. I also see a 99,000 or 69% decrease for DDS. It's oh, okay. Oh, I got it. I see where it is. Okay. DDA, the proposed budget includes an increase of $9 million to account for what says anticipated growth, the intellectual development disabilities, and IFS, individual and family services waivers. I think you covered a little bit of this, but what are the reasons for this anticipated growth in waiver services?
It's actually the growth rate that's calculated by DHCF, and it's looking at, as I said in my testimony, that the inflation rate in our waivers is higher than inflation generally. So we look at the increase in utilization, numbers of participants, utilization of services by those participants, and then the cost of those services, because they do factor in, they do factor in any necessary waiver rate increases. There will be a rate increase in July 2025.
Got it. And how many waivers is DDA budgeting for in fiscal year 26? And how many more is that from fiscal year 25?
I don't know what's wrong with my hearing today.
How many waivers is DDA budgeting for in fiscal year 26? And how many more is that from fiscal year 25?
So we have the 2 waivers, the IFS waiver and the IDD waiver. The numbers in each of those, I think, are 1963 in the IDD waiver and 150 and 150 in the IFS waiver.
And what is that? How many, given both waivers, how many is that? How many are you budgeting? The ones you're budgeting for in 26, how many more is that from fiscal year 25?
Oh, so we have a net increase in our waiver slots each year. And so the increase is that we budget for 20 additional IDD slots and 30 additional IFS slots.
Got it. That's what I was looking for.
Okay.
I see an increase of 2.9 million and 6 FTEs in service planning and coordination operations under DDA. Why are these additional FTEs if waiver growth is primarily due to waiver rates, not numbers of waivers? I see an increase of 2.9 million and 6 FTEs in service planning and coordination operations under DDA. And I was wondering, why are these additional FTEs if waiver growth is primarily due to waiver rates, not number of waivers?
What we're actually seeing is adjustment or realignment of our overall staff. The overall staff is not changed within those areas, but it's a matter of the alignment within the programs within the DDA, DDA administration.
And what's the reason for the alignment?
What we had done is looked at the functions of those individuals and made sure that they were accurately or properly aligned, as over time when people are coming into the organization, just making sure that they're properly in the programs that they should be hired into. So overall, at the end of the year, each year we go through and look at necessary realignments within our programs just to make sure that the funding is consistent within those different programs within the overall administration. So,
Understood.
yes.
Okay. DDS's special purpose revenue fund includes an increase of 3.5 million in the Developmental Disabilities Services Division to account for anticipated revenue from Social Security insurance, Social Security disability insurance, and pension payments for non-Medicaid clients receiving cost of care support. How was this 3.5 million calculated?
This 3.5 million is based on existing fund balance within the special purpose revenue, and it's drawn from that. So it is all special purpose revenue within that fund balance is now being directed toward overall SPR. So it was in previous fund balance, now it's
Okay.
being drawn out and represented fully in the budget.
Okay. Does that happen every year?
No, this is the first year that that's occurred.
Okay. And so why this year?
In order to be able to fully draw against the fund balance and to properly correct for all revenue that is going to SPR. It's also a matter of the fact that there's an adjustment overall for local, and then looking at the overall funds for our budget, that was an area that was available and it was deemed that it would be used fully for our contract purposes.
Got it. Is the intent to do this for future years?
If there is additional fund balance, but it's likely that overall revenues will not get to that point where we will have that existing fund balance in future years.
Got it. Director, I was surprised and disappointed to see that the mayor's proposed budget did not include sufficient funding for the Direct Support Professional Rate Payment Act and the Certified Nurse Aid Amendment Act. I'm glad to see a one-time increase of 11.5 million support wages for direct support professionals or DSPs to meet the 117.6% rate for fiscal year 2026. Is it correct that the DSP law is funded only for fiscal year 26 and there are no funds for the Certified Nurse Aid Amendment Act?
I'm not familiar with the CNA Act, and in fact, it has, I think, minimal impact on what we fund in DDS. The DSP Wage Act is funded through June 2026. So that wages, as I said, the living wage will increase in July 2025 to $17.95 per hour, which means that the DSP wage will be $21.11 per hour. If the living wage increases again in July 2026, there will not be a corresponding increase to the DSP wage at that time. And keep in mind that the DSP Wage Act covers more than just Department on Disability Services. So while we look at what the cost is to fund DDS, it's also covering home health aides and other direct support professionals.
I wanted to ask about the DSP vacancies. Let me see. Oh, does DDS track the vacancy rate for DSPs either throughout the district or among DDS providers?
We participate in the National Core Indicators, which tracks the vacancy rate. In fact, our vacancy rate, we have a participation rate of about 90% amongst our providers. And in 2023, our full-time DSP vacancy rate across that 90% that responded to the survey was 7.3% vacancy rate. The turnover rate and the vacancy rate in the District of Columbia, while it is a challenge, continues to be a challenge for our providers, is an envy of the other DD agencies across the country because we're called out as the lowest, in fact, in 2023 in those two areas.
Got it. Was wondering, I guess, given the lack of full funding for wages, is DDS concerned about the agency's ability to pay for quality care for as many district residents who are entitled to it?
No, and this is the reason that we did have to make difficult decisions. As you can see, there's more than a $20 million enhancement to our budget. And so there were limits on how far we could go with that, but we feel that with that 20 million, we'll be able to provide services to all people who need them.
We just spoke about the anticipated increased growth of ODD and IFS waivers. Are there currently enough DSPs in the district to meet that growth?
Yes.
Okay. What is DDS's plan if DSPs start to leave the district or the profession now that the wages they were counting on are no longer funded? How does DDS expect providers to maintain the same scale of quality care with fewer DSPs?
I guess I'd have a couple of responses to that. One is our rates compare favorably with the outlying jurisdictions, and so leaving the district for a similar job is not something that we anticipate or are concerned about. The other is we introduced some years ago in our waiver remote supports, which really does assist with decreasing staffing needs. We've provided most recently about 2 months ago in our provider leadership meeting, we provided a thorough overview and training technical assistance for our providers about how they could be implementing remote supports, because this is one way of addressing the staffing challenge that people have. And we are hoping, as we have the discussions this summer with staff. And another thing about remote supports is not only is it a cost savings, but I know from hearing from a person, and unfortunately there are far too few people currently receiving remote supports, but hearing from one person I know who does receive them, she talks about how important it is to her that it is her apartment, that she does not have people coming in, that when she needs people, she knows how to contact them and gets the support she needs. So this remote supports are not only about saving us funds, which they will do, but they are also about ensuring further independence for the people that we support. And we really want to work with providers to see how we can increase our utilization of that new service.
Yeah. I appreciate the 11.5 million in one-time funding for fiscal year 26, especially in a tight budget year. I'm sure you and Deputy Mayor Turnage fought hard for that. And so I do appreciate that. My biggest worry for service professionals were, obviously they deserve the higher wages. In fact, I think they deserve more, but it's because their work is difficult and it requires both a great amount of medical training and skill, as well as a tremendous capacity for compassion and empathy, as you know. And they were doing this essential work sort of long before COVID-19 pandemic and have been doing it sort of long after, the pandemic ended. And my second worry was that not making this investment would put the district's healthcare system back to a crisis situation it was before, any laws were passed, when we were unable to sort of attract and retain DSPs sufficiently. And that, in my view, would have consequences not just for DSPs, but also the people who rely on DSPs, who deserve to be cared for by the people who are earning a dignified wage. So I guess I look forward to us figuring out a way to make sure our DSPs are paid what they should be paid for the amount of skill, training, work, and compassion they're delivering to district residents. I was wondering if you all heard the discussion about the Mayor's Office of Deaf, Blind, and Hard of Hearing. I won't rehash the discussions because that was mostly for the director. Would DDS change the manner in or extent to which the agency partners with MODDHH if MODDHH becomes a part of DDS?
The only way that it would change is that Director Cook and I would have we have contact now. We work together on initiatives. We would have regular meetings. We would have the opportunity to coordinate even more. I see there being benefits for DDS, which is part of why I do feel that it could be a positive change for the Department on Disability Services, because as she said, they provide referrals to RSA, and making sure that we're coordinating closely with them on serving the deaf community would be important. Director Cook would continue to be a mayorally appointed, council-approved position, cabinet position, and they would continue to operate all in the same way they're operating currently.
Got it. Okay. I appreciate that. and I won't rehash that discussion that we had, but I appreciate that response to that, what it would look like if that needed to occur or had occurred. RSA, I don't see any large changes to Rehabilitation Services Administration budget or FTA account, so I don't think I need to dive in there. But has the deputy director position been filled yet? And if not, when can we expect that to happen?
No, it has not been filled yet. We hope that it will happen very soon. It's been helpful as well because I've been acting in that role. I've learned a great
I
deal
know,
about how
we can't
we're
be acting
doing
in this
there.
role forever.
And we are working hard to make sure that we bring in someone who's a VR professional, really understands all the programming, and will be able to hit the ground running with really understanding VR, understanding the services we provide, including Randolph Shepherd, to be able to help us move the program forward.
So one, are you all impacted by the current freeze?
That position is currently fully federally funded, so no.
Right, that's what I was hoping. And then what are we doing? Is there like a national search going on? Has DDS hired a firm to run the search? What's going on?
We've worked with the Council of State Administrators of Vocational Rehabilitation, putting information out through that network, trying to recruit. We have reached out to MODDHH to get help from them on how they do national searches, because we really are looking beyond DC, partly because we want someone who is a VR professional and making sure that we don't limit our pool of potential applicants to just the District of Columbia.
Got it. Okay, I look forward to hearing that this position is filled.
I look forward to telling you as soon as it is.
Lastly, as I always do, let's just talk briefly on the Randolph Shepherd Vending Facilities Program before we close out. Was Randolph Shepherd affected by the administration's dismantling of the Department of Education?
No. And in
Okay.
fact, the Rehabilitation Services Administration federally at the Department of Education has been mostly not touched by any of this. There is a proposal to eliminate the client assistance program, direct funding, but along with that proposal, which I think Ms. Bernstein spoke to, along with that proposal came guidance from RSA that it is federally mandated and it would be consistent with our VR grant to have a pass-through grant to continue to fund those services.
Oh, wow. Okay. I think during DDS Performance Oversight, a few months ago, we discussed Department of Education's plans to conduct an audit of the program, which was, I think, scheduled for fiscal year 25, but was then likely to be moved to fiscal year 26. Does DDS still anticipate Department of Education will conduct an audit in fiscal year 26?
I expect that they will. The current, I'm trying to remember the person's title, but the person in charge over at RSA, who I spoke with several months ago, had indicated to me informally that they expected us to be included in 2025. We were not, so I do fully expect that in 2026 we will have. Now, just to be clear, and it's a monitoring visit as opposed to an audit. We do have periodic audits, and we also have monitoring visits. The monitoring visits are actually far more comprehensive than the audit. The audit looks at financial issues. The monitoring visit looks at financial issues as well as service issues, practice issues, implementation of the program at a policy level. And you can find the results of our monitoring visits on our website and on RSA's website. Those come every 5 years. And that's why we should have had it actually in 2024. They got behind because of COVID.
And who does the monitoring visits?
The Department of Education.
They do it. Okay. Do you know when was the last monitoring visit?
2019.
Wow. Okay. Has DOE provided RSA as a program state licensing agency sort of any additional information about upcoming changes to the program?
Actually, we've gotten more information from our national organization, the Council on State Administrators of Vocational Rehabilitation, and they get information both on the Hill and from Department of Education. The expectation is, and I mean, we were very happy to see when the Department of Education had significant layoffs, that did not affect RSA at the federal level at all. The plan at this, the expectation at this time is to the extent Department of Education changes, all RSA services would shift over perhaps most likely to the Department of Labor.
Okay. All right. Well, please keep me informed if they do. Yeah, just keep us informed.
The benefit there too is that all other workforce programs in DC are overseen by Department of Labor. So it would bring everyone under one umbrella.
Okay. So you see a benefit there.
Yes.
Okay. I know during DDS performance oversight hearing a few months ago, we discussed the cases filed by vendors against DDS in the Office of Administrative Hearings. I know those cases were consolidated. What's the status of the consolidated case? And have any new cases been filed?
I don't believe that new cases have been filed. No. Okay. No new cases have been filed. The consolidated cases had dates for motions for cross summary adjudication, and so they're pending at that level. We did recently take some actions that I'm hoping will address many of the issues that arose there, and I think your office was copied by the vendors on that, on my communication regarding that, which was to try and resolve some of this issue about our micro markets, along with taking the action that we took. We also made sure that everyone was aware. We took the action at the beginning of June, and we made everyone aware of their due process rights and their timeframes for acting on those. And to date, there's been no appeals filed so far.
Okay.
And so we will see. They have about till next week, I think.
Okay. All right. We're still receiving phone calls and emails from vendors. I don't know if things are improving with the program, or if it doesn't feel like things are improving based on those things.
I think things are moving, perhaps not as quickly as people would like. I do think for context, it is helpful to keep in mind that while 40% of our vendors no longer live in the district, I've never been aware of one that has sought to transfer to either Maryland or Virginia, where they now reside. So while they do express concerns about the operation of the program in DC, they are also speaking with their feet and remaining with the program, and we hope working with us to move it forward.
Got it. Okay. I know several members of the Blind Vendors Committee are still sort of feeling dissatisfied by the way in which the program is being administered. We will, again, we're hopeful to see improvement there as a committee. I don't want to get into specifics, but I'm particularly concerned now because the plan was if issues were not resolved through the OAH process and vendors were still unhappy, we revisit the previously notion of sort of having a mediation with the Department of Education, which is now in flux. Given what's happening on the federal level, I don't know if that's the best option or even an option at all anymore.
That actually wouldn't be in flux. All of that exists within the RSA framework, which still exists intact currently at Department of Education. And as I said, if any changes are made, it would move in whole over to another agency.
Got it.
Interestingly, all of Project 2025, when we discussed recommendations about changes in the Department of Education, made no reference to the Rehabilitation Services Administration at the department.
Got it. Okay. I know we tried bringing in new people to run the program. I know we are trying to getting through the OAH process. What happens next, I guess? How do we get the program to a place where the vendors are both successful and happy?
So we do have one new vendor who just started.
Okay.
We had a call down recently that included assigning 15 new locations to vendors, so we'll be working with them. Okay. We've been working closely as well with GSA because GSA is responsible for property management in a high percentage of federal government offices. Many of them are managed on their own, so we have to work with GSA as well as some individual agencies. So we've been working with them to make sure that the operation of individual facilities meets the needs of the people in those buildings, and then working with the vendors, as well as we can to both address issues related to services in these individual buildings, as well as their concerns about how adequately we may be supporting them in providing the level of service that the federal agencies seek.
Got it. Okay, let's continue to talk and meet on this issue and have a new path forward. I think that's all the questions I have for you, Director, and your team. Any remaining comments you want to put on the record regarding the budget?
No, thank you. I think that, well, I do just want to recognize one more time, in this challenging fiscal year, the mayor provided over a $20 million enhancement to Department on Disability Services, which I think truly reflects the commitment that Mayor Bowser has to ensuring that the people supported at DDS receive the services that they need.
Thank you. Thank you so much. Thank you all. And thank you especially to your team and all of those who serve district government within the agency. We truly appreciate you all's hard work. I want to thank all of our public and government witnesses who testified today. I also want to thank all of our fantastic ASL interpreters and captioners in person and online for making this hearing accessible for district residents. This concludes today's fiscal year 2026 budget oversight hearing for the Office of Disability Rights, the Office of Deaf, Deafblind, and Hard of Hearing, and the Department on Disability Services. If you would like to submit written testimony for the record, remember to please do so by 5 p.m. on Friday, June 20th by uploading your testimony to the Council's hearing management system or emailing facilities@dccouncil.gov. In closing, I also want to thank Sebastian Wyman, my committee director, who's done an amazing job preparing for this budget oversight hearing and continues to do the work to support our committee as we are in a difficult budget year and a tight timeline. The time is 2:09 p.m. and this hearing is adjourned.